Okay, good evening and welcome to the Tuesday, June 18th meeting of the Brattleboro Select Board. We began with committee interviews at 5:15. We had interviews for the Recreation and Parks Board and the Planning Commission. And now we're going to convene for our regular meeting. John, could you confirm for me whether this meeting was in fact properly warned?
Yes, Daniel, it was properly warned.
Wonderful. Okay, so our first order of business is to approve the minutes. We have minutes from June 4th. Do you have a motion? France?
I move that we approve the minutes from the June 4th meeting.
Okay. Any discussion on that motion? Richard?
Well, I just wanted, there's two corrections I believe need to be made.
Okay, go ahead.
On line 35 on page 1, that all board members the word should be are instead of is.
Okay.
And
Did you get that?
Yep.
Yeah.
And on page on page 3, line 38, I don't know why that 20, I don't think that 20 is supposed to be there. And 20 replace, just strike out 20.
That should be 2 with a parentheses.
And
Oh, I see.
Yep, like
Okay.
1.
To number the tasks.
Typo.
oh, I see, okay. So it should be, all right, so that's all I have.
That's it?
Yeah.
Okay. Any other comments on the minutes from June 4th?
No.
France?
Barring any objection, I would change my motion to accepting the minutes as amended.
Sure. No objection from this one. Okay. All those in favor of accepting the minutes as amended, please raise their hand and say aye.
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 Aye. That passes 5-0. On to Chair's remarks. Keep them brief tonight. We have a holiday tomorrow that John's going to speak to, and also some very hot weather that John's going to speak to. I kind of reflect on both of those events about my privilege to have an air-conditioned vehicle to ride around in, an air-conditioned office to spend time in, and an air-conditioned home for the large part where I will, sleep tonight. And there are many in our community that do not have those privileges, and I hope and pray that over the next couple of days folks will be okay. And I'm glad that the town is providing cooling stations, and that's something that the state is also providing outside of Brattleboro. On Thursday, we had an all-day-long select board goal-setting retreat event, which was really great, and we did end up with some consensus around priorities for the year, and that will come back in a future meeting, July 9th. Great. So that's all I have for today, and I'll pass it on to John for manager's comments.
Thanks, Daniel. It's hot out there, so welcome to the Select Board's Cooling Off Center here at 230 Main Street. Hot temperatures and high humidity are forecasted today through Thursday, and it's likely to continue into the weekend as well. So please, everyone, stay safe. Check in on your family, on your elderly neighbors, anyone that is having problems out in Brattleboro. There are cooling sites around town at the Senior Center, the town pool at Living Memorial Park, the Brooks Memorial Library, and the Central Fire Station. Please check brattleboro.gov for information on days and hours at those places. I want to acknowledge the diverse, demanding, and difficult work of the police department tonight, especially in this heat. Chief Hardy's officers responded to the death of a toddler and caught a bank robber all in one day yesterday. They consistently give their all for the town of Brattleboro, for which I'm exceedingly grateful. As Liz mentioned, tomorrow is the town-recognized Juneteenth holiday. And for the second time, we will be having an arts show that is now open at the Brattleboro Municipal Center here at 230 Main Street. This year's show features local painter Candace Taylor Diallo. And now, in its second year, this art show, this annual exhibit, coincides with the Juneteenth holiday to celebrate Black artistic expression in Brattleboro. It was announced last week that the Vermont Community Foundation's Withington Fund, celebrating its 20th year, has now given more than $1 million to recreation projects that benefit the people in Brattleboro. I want to acknowledge how much this support has extended the abilities of the Recreation and Parks Department to bring amazing recreational opportunities to the public. The Rec and Parks Director has asked me to mention to you that the Living Memorial Park pool has opened for the season and is now open every day from 1 to 8 p.m. Swim lesson registration is scheduled for June 20th and 21st from 10 to noon at the pool, so right before it opens. Rec and Parks is also still taking registration for summer camps and programs. Registration can be made in person at the Rec and Parks office at 207 Main Street in the Gibson-Aiken building, or online at brattleboro.gov. The town assessor asked me to inform the select board that the grand list for 2024 was lodged today in the town clerk's office for viewing, as well as posted on the town's website. And the library director asked me to give a reminder that the library will close at 1 p.m. on Thursday for a network transition that will result in a more robust and faster internet and Wi-Fi service for patrons. Also, several upcoming events for your calendars. There will be a public forum on the future of Estieville Common, or also known as Fuller Park, on June 20th from 6 to 7:30 p.m. at the park. Please bring a lawn chair if you plan to attend that. There will be a groundbreaking celebration for the new Amtrak train station on Monday, June 24th at 11 a.m. The celebration will be held at the site of the new station, which is at 21 Depot Street. There will be an open house pool feasibility study meeting on Tuesday, June 25th, with a rain date of Wednesday, June 26th at Living Memorial Park Pool from 3:30 to 6:30 p.m. And there will be a public meeting on the Canal Street corridor study on Thursday, June 27th from 6 to 7:30 p.m. in the Select Board meeting room. This project is a planning study of how to make Canal Street safer for walkers and bicyclists. And if you missed any of those dates, just check brattleboro.gov for information about those upcoming events and meetings. Finally, I just wanted to mention, due to the heat, Casella will be picking up trash, compost, and recycling earlier in the day when it's cooler this week. So please have your items out curbside by 5 a.m. The schedule will not be affected by the Wednesday, Juneteenth holiday. If you have any questions about that, please call Department of Public Works at 802-254-4255. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, John. Select board members with comments and or committee reports. Okay. Hearing none, we'll move on to public participation. This is the part of the meeting where people who have something that they would like to comment on that is not on tonight's agenda may bring it up. They could also request that an item from the consent agenda be pulled for discussion at a later point during the meeting. So if there's a member in the room that would like to speak, please raise your hand. Ms. O'Connor, I think I saw your hand first. And if you'd identify yourself.
This is a fun one. I'm Kate O'Connor from Brattleboro, and I'm going to break a rule, but by the time I do it, it'll be too late.
Fine.
You can't stop me.
We'll see.
I just want to talk about, give a public service announcement about the Brattleboro 4th of July parade. And I want to make sure that everybody knows it's on the 4th of July. It's at 10 a.m. And if you want to be in the parade, please email Brattleboro Goes Forth, and that's FOURTH @gmail.com. And it's an all-volunteer effort that puts the parade on. So we appreciate anybody who wants to be in it with us. And it's rain or shine, and it goes from flat to the Commons. So we hope everybody will come and see it, and everyone who wants to be in it will be in it.
Great.
Thank you.
And we have your parade permit on the consent agenda, so fingers crossed on that one. Other members of the public that would like to speak on something that's not on tonight's agenda? Dick? Mr. DeGray?
Dick DeGray, Brattleboro. 2 weeks ago, I asked about the camera installation on High and Main. Has the RFP been sent out for the cameras? Can you give me an update of where we are with that? It was really disappointing for me to hear that you hadn't done anything on something that was voted on last October. And, looking forward to seeing if there was good results with that camera, so we might be able to move on and installing them in other places. So to hear you last week, John, say that nothing had been done, and I was a little disappointed in the board members for not following that up. You were the guys, except for over on Mr. Davis, all of you were voted for that and were pushing for that. It's your responsibility to follow up and look at what the progress is of that. Not a citizen, me coming forward and asking the questions. Not scolding you, but disappointed a little bit in you for saying, some of you should have been saying, maybe in February or January, saying, John, where do we stand with this? It doesn't have to be an agenda item, but not to have anything done this late in the year was really disappointing to me. And I hope it doesn't happen again on issues of safety that concern us in town, because we really have some more issues going on. I don't think they're life-threatening, but there's a lot of activity down in Plaza Park that you may not be aware of, and some of you might be aware of it. But going by there, watching people smoking crack and using the park for their facilities to urinate is a little disappointing when I go by and see that. Not sure what you can do about that, but just wanted to make you aware of that stuff is going on down there. Thank you.
Thank you. John, is there an update?
Slight update. First of all, I'd like to just correct Mr. DeGray. I don't believe I said nothing had been done. Quite a bit has been done on that. We just haven't not installed those cameras yet. We had, as I've been keeping the board apprised of this, we've had some issues with contracting on that project. We have been trying to work things through with a contractor on installing those cameras. It was an issue beyond the control of the town. We now have decided to move on from the contractor that we were working with on that project, and we have had very promising conversations with a new vendor that we think can do this project in an even better way than we had hoped originally. So we should have good progress on this soon, and we'll certainly let you know when we have something to report on it. So.
Okay, thanks, John.
Yep.
Any other members of the public in the room or on Zoom who would like to speak on something not on the agenda? Mr. Landry.
Good evening. So I'm here both as a resident of Brattleboro and as someone that works downtown. As some of you may know, I'm the facilities manager at the Holstein Association. And so my comment and question is anyone on the select board or in the town offices or at the Brattleboro Police Department at all concerned about the activities and the optics of certain groups of individuals that are roaming our town? I can speak mainly from what I see every day of the activities around the co-op and in the park directly below the Holstein. It's daily open use, drug dealing, sleeping in the park, and the trash that's left behind, nobody should have to deal with. As someone that works downtown, that is migrated to our property at the Holstein Association. And I know it's private property, so I need to deal with it with the police department. But I'm constantly combating late night drug use on our property, it being used as a bathroom facility. I got the same person sleeping there night after night after night that I chase out. And I just don't understand what the town's approach is. I mean, the optics are not good. We worry about business downtown. We worry about tourism. And they come down the main drag into town and they see this activity. Someone's going to get hurt. People walk. Just the other night, I was going over to Hinsdale, and there was a couple that were impaired by something, just staggering down the middle of the travel lane. Could care less. So I don't know what the town's approach is, if the town does have an approach to correct these activities. I'd like to hear what that approach is, and maybe we need a new approach. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't want to speak substantively about that, but maybe it is something that we can kind of talk about in a coming meeting. John, Liz, and I, maybe we can figure out how to do that. Thank you. Any other members of the public that would like to speak about something that's not on today's agenda? Okay, seeing none, so I'm going to move on to the consent agenda. John, would you give us a summary of what's on there, please?
Sure. There are 6 items on consent tonight. If you approve this agenda, you'll be approving 2 reappointments, Chief Howard as the Forest Fire Warden and Dan Adams as the Tree Warden. You'll be approving an allocation approach for the new child tax credit payroll tax. You'll be approving a parade permit for Brattleboro Goes Forth to hold a 4th of July parade on the 4th of July. You will be approving an outside consumption permit for Plated Restaurant and Bar at 136 Main Street. And you will be approving a second-class liquor license and a tobacco license for SKJ Sales 2 Corporation at 328 Marlborough Road.
Thanks, John. Board members, is there anybody who would like to pull an item from that list for consideration at the end of the meeting? France?
Yes, item B, the Childcare tax credit payment allocation. I'd like to have some discussion about that.
Great. Okay, so we'll have discussion about that at the end. Peter?
Yeah. I'm just curious with the discussion at the end if there's just something, there's a minor clarification that you might need now that would allow us to leave it on the consent agenda.
That's an interesting question. We don't typically get into it. Why don't you maybe say what you're looking for, and maybe it can be answered in less than 10 words or something like that? Go ahead.
No, it's not a minor clarification. I actually want to talk about how it's appearing now as opposed to earlier in the budget process, and what the actual policy should be as to whether the employees participate in this additional payment.
Okay, no problem. So we will take that up at the end of new business. So that will be item G. And folks who are interested in commenting on that should join us sometime around about 9 o'clock. Okay, so we have an amended consent agenda. Would anybody like to make a motion? Elizabeth?
I move to accept the consent agenda as amended.
Thank you. Elizabeth has made a motion to accept the consent agenda as amended. All those in favor, please raise their hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That passes 5-0. We will move on to old business. So the only item on old business tonight is the FY25 parking fund budget. John, were you going to open this up?
Yeah. Patrick has been doing, as you all know, Patrick's been doing most of the work on this. But I did just want to mention to the board that while we have a somewhat complicated task before us, I think, to land on a budget here tonight, that it's really important that we try to do it at this meeting because we need to have expenditures approved by July 1st in order to implement this for FY25. And so just with that reminder, I would turn it over to Patrick to...
Can I ask a clarifying question about that? So yes, we need a budget in place. There's also like a question about whether the system should use cash. Is that something you need tonight or would like tonight?
that is something that we would like tonight.
Okay.
It's not as important as having a budget proposed.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Patrick.
Sure. So I completely agree with John Potter. The important thing tonight is to get a budget passed. We would also like to get your sense of whether we're ready to make a decision about continuing to utilize cash within the system or to transition to a system which is cash-free, makes use of debit and credit cards and a parking app. That would be important information as well. I'm not going to go over everything we discussed at our last meeting because we discussed it and resolved much of it at the last meeting. Within the parking budget for fiscal 25, we've reviewed expenses at a rate of $1,015,866. And regardless of any of the options we discussed tonight, that level of expenditure carries forward. So really what we're talking about are differences in the revenue, and differences in the revenue that result from different potential rate changes within the parking system. Now, before I dive into discussing any of the options put before the board this evening, I want to call out my friend Dick DeGray, who 2 weeks ago made mention of the fact that, hey, wait a minute, if we're going to be adjusting parking rates, that's going to take a little time to go into effect. He's absolutely right about that, and forgive me for not including that in the memo 2 weeks ago. But what I'd like to point out then is that in any of the models, in any of the options that we discussed this evening, the first 3 months are going to continue forward with the same rates that are in place today, meaning that it's only the last 9 months which really differ, okay? What that means is for any of the options that have been labeled as a full cost recovery or one that has 100% cost recovery, it will achieve that likely in the second year, not in the first year, because the first 3 months are going to be a continuation of the existing rates, okay? One of the things, Liz?
So that's where this gain loss in the last row comes from on our charts.
The gain loss in the last row actually refers to the cash position of the fund if that particular option was chosen. Take option 5, for example. It would provide $927,000 the first year. Then you come most of the way down that chart and you see in year 2, that would generate over $1 million. It'd be $1,018,000, so it would be an additional $90,000. So that's really sort of how to read that comparison. One of the yes, sir.
Whilst we're on that, so it was interesting for me to note that even with 100% cost recovery, as in the fees and permit costs and fines actually pay for the parking system, even with that, our cash balance still decreases each year. I wonder if you can kind of explain how that is possible. So
let's take that option 5 one more time, okay? It's showing revenues of $927,000 and expenses of a little over $1 million, meaning that's going to be a deficit, even though it will get us to 100% cost recovery in the second year. It's not going to be able to get us there in the first year. As a result of that, it's going to draw down some of the fund's cash.
Right, and so I see a net loss in year 1 of $88,553, and the change to the cash position of $109,433.
Yes, sir.
Those numbers are not the same.
That's correct.
Because we're spending money from the fund.
That goes back to
first 3 months.
The details that we went through when we looked at the cash reconciliation and the fact that we need to account for depreciation, although it's not a cash expenditure.
Yeah.
So.
Good old depreciation.
Okay, we'll give you that.
I wouldn't look for those two to match up.
Okay.
It's certainly nothing to be concerned about that they don't.
Great. Okay. Thanks. So let's let Patrick do his brief presentation, and then we can dive into the questions.
So while I'm talking about the need to change the ordinance to change the rates, That led the administration to sit down with Attorney Bob Fisher and talk about, are there any other ways that we could construct our parking ordinance such that we might be able to expedite a change in future years if the board so desired? And the answer to that is yes. We could rewrite the parking ordinance to say, look to the town manager's office and look on the town's website for the parking rate sheet. And if we were to rewrite the ordinance in that manner, that would allow us in future years to be able to put a change in parking rates into effect by simple majority vote of the board. So it would be useful to know if that's something that the board was inclined to do, or if the board prefers to have the slow and deliberate 3-month process for the changing of rates.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
What's
so,
next?
Since writing this memo, and since putting together this comparison, it's been brought to my attention by several at the table that perhaps no one is altogether interested in looking at a partial cost recovery option. If that's the case, then I could isolate my comparison to options 4, 5, and the brand new option 6, which are all full cost recovery. Is that in keeping with the board's?
I don't know. We haven't had a public discussion of that, so maybe we should hear what the board's pleasure is.
Why don't you go ahead, and if people have questions about the other options, you'll know.
Very good. All right, so looking at the 3 full cost recovery options, we're looking at option 4, 5, and a brand new option 6, which is presented on the table in front of you. I'm going to start with the first 2, options 4 and 5. Each of these options raises the short-term rate to $1.50 from its present rate of $1. One of them, option 4, has the parking system operating 7 days a week as opposed to 6 days a week. And by virtue of that, this allows us to maintain downward pressure.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yes, sir.
Is this backup material available for folks in the audience?
Option 6.
Because this is pretty detailed stuff, and I think it's important for folks to be able to follow along. Is that just one copy?
No, there's several.
Okay, could you pass them around? And do you guys have the other pages in some form?
Anybody else interested in this?
Sorry for interrupting so much. I just want to make sure people can follow along.
If you'd like, I can make more copies.
Maybe we need that, yeah. That would probably be helpful rather than us interrupt you again.
Or maybe they'd also like the 4 and 5.
Yes, no, they definitely should have both of those.
Hey, Pete.
Would you do both of those pages, Peter? Thank you.
Sure.
All right. This is important business, and there's a lot of detail, so let's just hang on for 30 seconds. Talk amongst ourselves. Dead air. Yeah, you got nothing to say.
We've had way too much of that tonight.
Yeah, that's true. We did have quite a bit of dead air. Patrick's beard's looking nice. I don't know if it's going to be good for this hot weather. Yes, Richard.
Maybe,
Is it a question about the parking budget?
yeah, just something you mentioned prior to the options was changing the ordinance to have the select board do this more quickly.
Yeah.
Is that
We're going to
something-
get into that in a
Are we
minute.
going to talk about that?
Yeah,
in
so
more
here's
detail?
what I would like to see happen. I'd like everybody to have the information in front of them. I'd like Patrick to do his presentation, and then I'm going to take 3 things. 1, we're going to talk about the parking budget and the rates. 2, we're going to talk about whether the ordinance change should happen this way. And 3, we're going to consider whether it should be cashless or not. And we'll do it in that order, because there's a lot. So you don't find in the hot weather that the beard is too much?
I don't see how that's germane to the conversation.
It's certainly not germane. I'm trying to talk about non-germane things so
Appreciate
as
it,
to
Pete.
not fall into the trap of keeping going.
Well, I think Patrick goes from an air-conditioned office
Yes,
to an air-conditioned
and he loves the short
car.
sleeves. He's always the short sleeves.
Yeah.
Oh, you're commenting on my
Below zero.
That's interesting. Okay, members of the public, do you have what you need in front of you to follow along? Wonderful. Patrick, are you ready to resume?
Yes, sir.
And we're going to really not interrupt you now.
Okay, fair enough. So I'll focus my presentation on options 4, 5, and the new one, option 6.
Thanks, Patrick.
I'm going to start by talking about the differences between 4 and 5. Option 4 raises short-term parking rates from $1 to $1.50, raises long-term parking rates from 40 cents to 55 cents, raises permits from $400 annually to $675, raises reserved permits at the transportation from $800 to $1,000, adjusts Elm Street from $220 up to, what does that say there, $350, and functions 7 days a week, and raises parking citations from $10 to $15. It accomplishes all of those things. And in the second year, it should be a full cost recovery option. Okay? Option 5 differs from that just slightly. It maintains the current 6-day-a-week standard. And in order to be able to offset the additional revenue that a 7th day would provide, it requires that we raise long-term rates up to 75 cents an hour, and that regular open permits get raised to $7.35. That's the principal difference. Okay? So you've got two right there between 4 and 5, two 100% cost recovery options. One's a 7-day-a-week, one's a 6-day-a-week. The 6-day-a-week allows for, or rather makes up for the loss of the revenue by having slightly higher long-term rates. So earlier today I was asked, could we develop a 100% or full cost recovery option, one that leaves short-term parking rates exactly where they are, no changes to them, keeps them at $1? And the answer to that is yes. And this would be option 6. It's a full recovery option. Short-term rates are $1. Unfortunately, long-term rates need to also be $1 in order to be able to accomplish this. And this has the impact of sort of wiping out the differentiation between short-term and long-term parking, other than the amount of time you can make use of it. But it would cost the same thing to park in the Highgrove lot, for example, as it would to park on Main Street. In addition, that would require the need to raise parking permits as high as $950 from $400, which would be another significant increase. Reserve permits at the transportation center would rise to $1,200. This is a 6-day-a-week parking system. It would allow us to maintain short-term rates at the present dollar rate. Now, the question may be floating around in somebody's mind, wait a minute, why is it such that it takes all of these significant increases to offset a relatively small increase in short-term parking rates? And the reason for that is it's the short-term parking which really drives revenue in the system. So if that goes from $1 to $1.50, that accomplishes quite a bit. Whereas even raising long-term rates all the way up to $1 doesn't accomplish as much. So there are 3 options in front of you here. One's a 7-day-a-week, one's a 6-day-a-week. One maintains rates for short-term parking at $1. The other 2 raise to $1.50. When I stop there, let you ask some questions.
Great, thanks, Patrick. Appreciate that. So, board, we've got 4 options in front of us here. I also want to say that if there's some sort of other permutation that folks want to see that's not off the table, it's just maybe a little challenging live. So let's open up some discussion about these options. I don't want to get into a motion yet. Preliminary discussion. Richard.
You may have addressed this at the last meeting, but is there no added expense for an extra day in terms of personnel for the parking?
Yeah. You know, we could, but we also think it's feasible not to. We would separate the schedules a little more so that our staff would be working more independently. And so there would be less overlap between existing staff. Does So we think it's possible to achieve a 7th day without having to add additional staff.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? Grants?
Well, this sort of takes off from that question, but goes further. I'm wondering about the possibility of, well, I guess you'd have to call it option 7, but what it would be is the rate structure would be similar to option 5. Let me see if I can put this together properly. The point of it really is that if we go to the kiosks with the no cash option, there was mention at our last meeting that we could perhaps expand the duties of the parking employees somewhat. I would not be greatly in favor of that. I would perhaps rather see a decrease in the number of parking employees. If we stuck to 6 days and we didn't have the responsibility for emptying the parking meters or the kiosks of cash, I wonder if we couldn't make do with 4 instead of 5 employees. And then that would enable us to keep the rates lower for the people who are parking.
Okay. Thank you, Franz. Board members, is that something that you want to consider? Okay. It doesn't seem like there's a lot of interest in considering that.
I think we maybe hear from the staff about their thoughts, and so, just to do it on spur of the moment seems abrupt to me.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Peter?
Well, yeah, it's not that I'm a fan. I'm just still trying to digest the thought.
Yeah.
So,
but go ahead.
I would put out that the option 6 exists because it was something that I brought up at the last meeting. So, as I'm seeing this right now for the first time, I'm a little disappointed. It wasn't part of the original things that I can see. But so my response to keeping the short-term rates where they were in the Harmony lot and on Main Street and all the side streets was to help promote business and people coming in to our downtown. And as Pierre pointed out, right now the perception and the optics of coming into our downtown are not overly enticing. If we double the parking meters downtown and in the short-term lots, I think that creates a further problem. But what has been done here that I'm seeing here is now all of a sudden an open annual cost for a permit has now doubled, which then in turn, I think anybody who is buying, and I'm assuming, if I'm understanding this right, these are the permits that are purchased to park long-term in the facility.
That's correct.
Those have now doubled. So we're going in the wrong direction as far as I'm concerned for the people who have to work downtown and pay for, and for some of those people, this could be a hardship. So that is where I'm concerned. And I guess, look, we can keep going out until we're at option 58 here in the different ways that we can. And I understand that a decision needs to be made tonight. I'm really sorry that I didn't see this sooner than just tonight. I'm a little disappointed that I didn't see it a little sooner than tonight. Does any of this get alleviated? Can we keep I understand rates have to go up in order to make us whole. I get it. I'm not pushing against that. But is there, what does adding a 7th day to option 6 do? Can we keep the cost of a permit down by adding that 7th day to even along an option 4 or 5 level?
Okay. Sorry, I cut you off.
No, I'll have more.
Yeah,
that's what I got for right now.
So I just want to kind of check in with Patrick. So because we just heard 2 sort of off the menu kind of suggestions. Patrick, are you prepared to work with us this evening if we want to kind of adjust any of these variables? And I know that we won't be arriving at a exact figure.
So I've been thinking a lot about that. And in doing these calculations sort of in real time is exceedingly difficult.
Yeah.
If you felt the need to get exact, then I would say articulate what you'd like a model built around and take a break. Give me a few minutes and I could come up with another one. What I noticed, however, in looking through option 4, option 5, and option 6 is that the revenue is largely the same in each one, right? So you could pass a budget today of, call it, $930,000 of revenue, and we could let the fine-tuned details find their way back to you at the next meeting. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes.
I do see what you're saying.
And that doesn't clog up this public meeting sitting here watching.
Isn't it fun to make the sausage in public, though?
I'm sorry?
Isn't it fun?
I got nothing to do till 11 tonight, so I'm good.
Oh, come on.
Okay.
I have.
Okay.
Got to sleep.
But what I'm saying is I think you could sort of bypass that, set the revenue at 930, and we can still tweak a little bit at the next meeting exactly how that's achieved, if that sort of makes sense to you. And if I may, if I could just speak to Peter's point for a second.
Sure.
You're absolutely right, Peter. That would be extremely detrimental, I would imagine, to anybody who is parking downtown for a lengthy period of time. If you're an employee at the works or something like that, that's going to be debilitating. The challenge is if we want to have a system that is full cost recovery, and we're not going to touch the short-term rates, then it's got to come from somewhere. And the additional revenue that a Sunday would add is surprisingly not all that much. It's some. It would allow for a little bit more downward pressure on the permits. You know, could the permits go from, what's it there, 950 down to 9.25 or 900? It might be that impactful, but it might be still more like 930, something like that.
I have a clarifying question first. So you're kind of proposing that we consider adopting a budget with a sort of revenue of around about $930,000, which is helpful in a way, but will we have public consideration of the rates that we're proposing in order to arrive at that budget?
If you could, because that would be the subject of your next two meetings.
Okay, that would be a rate setting kind of thing.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. All right, interesting. Liz, Franz, and then whomever else.
I like option 4. I think that there's a lot of good compromising elements in option 4 that perhaps it's the Sunday that allows for these modifications. But for example, 2 weeks ago, we were faced with $2, and now we're at $1.50 for the short-term rates. But this option 4 allows for a much more reasonable annual cost and long-term rate. So I like that a lot. And I just, I think it's a very reasonable compromise from all the things that we've discussed. And I think it's a significant savings to the employees in town. And I also want to remind people that that this is a user fee, and we want to make sure that the people pay for parking so that the taxpayers don't pay for parking. And of all of the permutations that I've seen, I think option 4 does that the best.
Okay, thank you. Franz?
Well, I'd like to point out that the proposal that I just made is actually the way to reconcile these various issues. If we want to have a more affordable parking system with lower potential revenues, which is what more affordable means, then the way to do it is by spending less money, if we can. And I think the efficiencies made available by the kiosks could move us in that direction. So that I'm not opposed to Patrick's idea about taking a little more time to set the actual rate structure, but I think we should very seriously look at the option of cutting the expenses, which probably inevitably means cutting staff time, on the grounds that with the new system, with the new information flows within this electronic system, with not having to empty parking meters, I think there's a decrease in the number of hours needed. I don't know the magnitude of it, but I think we'd be remiss if we didn't look at that seriously as a way to get the rates we want, deliver the services we need, and save people some money.
Of course, we haven't decided about the money.
Yes, we're going to. So what we need to accomplish is a parking budget. We need to consider whether the procedure for setting the rates is with an ordinance in this way or a different way, and we need to consider whether the system's going to be cashless. So I've heard like 3 different things. So we've heard Liz say, I like option 4. We've heard Franz say, I want to look at changing the number of staff that we employ, and I really don't feel ready for that decision tonight. And I doubt that you guys do. But maybe you can indicate whether that is something you're ready for.
It's a big proposal. I recognize
that.
Yeah. I can't put an exact number to it right off the top. What I can tell you is within the body of employees currently employed within the parking fund, you've got a parking enforcement coordinator. And I would say that position is essential for the functioning of the system at all. You've got 2 parking enforcement officers and 2 custodians. Presumably, you're talking about one of the 2 parking enforcement officers. What I would say is, regardless of whether you're talking about a 6-day-a-week system or a 7-day-a-week system, one person cannot patrol that entire, one person can't patrol a 6-day. They certainly can't patrol a 7-day. They can't even patrol a full day because parking is starts at 9 a.m. and goes to 6. So that's why there's staggered schedules amongst the 2 staff currently, so that they're covering the full day and the full 6 days.
Yeah.
So that's just something to consider.
So thank you for that helpful context. I don't feel comfortable really kicking around cutting staff right now. If there are 3 of you that really seriously want to consider that tonight, I will hear about it.
Why do you not feel comfortable doing that? I mean, I'm not looking for a decision tonight, but why you're not comfortable talking about it?
Well, we are just talking about it right now. Patrick just gave some context for what that would mean. And I don't feel adequately informed, prepared, and I don't actually feel like I want to reduce the number of staff in that department. I don't think that would be beneficial. I think that we've got some options here that can work for us. So that's... I'm not in favor of what you're proposing. If there are 2 other board members that are in favor of it, certainly we'll hear that and move in that direction if needs be.
I can speak to it for a second. I'm not, although I appreciate where the sentiment comes from. I think that losing any member of our parking facility is not anything that I'd be in favor of. So I'm in alliance with Daniel. Further, again, and maybe this is a minutia question at this point or a statement, since it looks like we're just going to kind of pass a number tonight that they need to work with and work out the finer details over the next few meetings. But again, the doubling in the long-term parking thing is something that, to quote the Big Lebowski, this aggression shall not stand. All right. So
are you looking at option 6 there?
Option 4, right? Okay. If I'm reading this correctly, that again, what's the annual cost now? 500?
I'm sorry, sir?
400.
400?
Regular permit and open permits?
Yeah, so if I'm going to buy an annual pass,
yep, it's $400.
Parking garages, how much?
400.
400. And we are proposing to tack 600 onto that in option 4.
We're proposing to raise it to 675.
You're looking at the reserve.
I'm looking at the wrong line.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that goes from 800 to 1,000.
Well, I mean, since we've not ever raised that for how long?
At least as long as I've been employed by the town, which I started in 2011.
Okay. I mean, a 50-cent increase to downtown meters ain't a horrible compromise. And if we are moving to a cashless system, nobody's going to feel it anyway.
Well, we'll see about that.
Yeah. I mean, just joking, of course.
Yeah.
But I mean, even though I'm not in favor of raising those spaces at all, and that also includes the 7-day.
Yes. Option 4.
Option 4 is,
7 days.
yes, 7 days.
I'm going to ruminate. I'll be right back.
Do some ruminating. Okay, Richard raised his hand. I see you, Dick. Give me a second.
I just wanted to point out that the 7-day option isn't just the financial, has more than just financial implications. In terms of providing access to shoppers. From what I heard at the last meeting from Dick and from Peter was that on Sunday, a lot of people who want to shop may be not able to find parking spaces. And so charging would look like another day. It wouldn't be the kind of day where you can't find a parking place.
Well, if I can just speak to that.
I'm sorry, is Richard saying that that's a benefit? Are you saying that's a benefit?
I'm saying having paid parking on Sunday
is good or bad?
Is a good
would be
thing.
better for local businesses.
Right, okay. All right, so that's what I understood. And then after Dick had said something in the last meeting about parking on Sunday, I have come into town on Sunday to just pick up something, parked, maybe gone and got a bagel, maybe ran into the shop. But I had noticed, had taken special note to kind of see some parking habits, seeing like people just kind of on a Saturday after everything closes, an open meter, just leaving their car there for the entire day. So that would plug it up. And I think probably adding that 7th day is a reasonable adjustment for our downtown.
Thank you. So I'm hearing some discussion here around option 4. Liz said she's in favor of it. Peter's ruminating. Richard's ruminating.
I like 4.
Richard's saying he likes 4. Okay. Franz, could you live with 4?
I could live with any of them.
Okay.
I just want to do what's best for the town.
Okay. I mean, I think that's what we're all trying to do here, because nobody is really in love with raising these rates, but I think we need to be responsible to this fund. So, Dick, you had a comment about what we're talking about right now?
Yeah.
Yeah, go right ahead. I didn't see your hand, sorry.
Thank you for the reference, Patrick. First thing I noticed when I got option 6 was the fines are at 176 and all the other ones are at 142. Could you tell me what that difference, that delta was?
Go right ahead. Yes, please.
Okay. So in options 4 and 5, parking citation, a basic parking citation for expired meter goes from $10 to $15. In option 6, it goes from $10 to $20.
Oh, so that's okay. I didn't see any note there, and I figured.
Yeah.
I figured that.
That was new information to me as well. So.
Yeah. Thank you. Now, because I don't have any the old budget, I think the line item, and this is just a guesstimate, and you can clear it up for me, for fines is roughly $90,000, $90,000 to $100,000 in the actual budget that we are in right now.
105.
105.
Yes.
Yeah, and those numbers are on option 1 here with the existing rates.
Option 1. Okay. And so by raising the fines by $5, we're only going to generate $35,000 of new revenue.
So, for the reason you pointed out 2 weeks ago,
right,
that too is not going to go into effect until the 4th month, and so citation fines would stay at their present rate for 3 months. That would drop it down a little bit in fiscal 25. It would increase in fiscal 26.
Okay, so that number would exponentially jump from 142 to like 175 or 1. at least 155 or 160.
I think 155 in a full year at a $15 rate.
Okay. The last thing I would say, I'm a strong proponent of the 7-day. I have seen over my 25 years of being on Main Street, parking that is taken by local residents that live downtown and people that just want to come down and park for free. And it really is an inconvenience for merchants. And I have said this before, I think I said it at the last meeting, we're a tourist town. And so we're really giving the tourists free parking. I see the cars that come in, people walk up to the pay and display meter to see if they have to pay for parking on Sunday. And somebody will yell out no, and then some people will put money in. So I hope that you would go to option 4. I think it benefits the permit people, which we're trying to help here, that live downtown in terms of their permits. But those people who have permits move into the Harmony lot or closer to their house. And so it really, even though they have a permit, they're not in those spots, they move up. And it only takes 10 or 20 cars. People drive around in Harmony like they're at the Daytona 500 looking for a parking place. They'll just go in circles for 15 minutes. So I know you're not crazy about raising rates, but people got a lot of information from the article in the paper, but I'm not sure everybody understands what an enterprise fund is. And if you might take a little time and say, it's got to pay for itself, or as a taxpayer, I certainly don't want to pay for when people were yelling free parking. That's going to shift over to the taxpayers, and I see a 13.5% school tax coming my way. I don't want to pay for parking downtown. Thank you.
Thanks, Dick. Yeah. There was a hand at the back, and I don't know your name, I'm sorry. If you would introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Susie Wagner from Brattleboro.
Hi, Susie.
As I was hearing this conversation, there's a word that I was hoping to hear and I didn't, and that's the word accessibility. And I would hope that an accessibility lens is something that's considered in thinking of any of these options. So that could be accessibility for people with disabilities, for example, or people who are low income, or people who use cash. Thinking over the years, as I've fed the meters many times, the difficulties that I had with young children of getting back in time to that and then coming up with that $10 ticket is really a challenge. And seeing that come to $20, my kids are grown now, but it is a poor tax for many people who are local. People with disabilities, yes, many have placards and can park in designated spots. Oftentimes those are taken, and then you're moving into another spot. And there are many people without placards or who have hidden disabilities, and many people who need longer time because of their disabilities to be utilizing that spot. These are all really basic supports for people in our community that should be a lens when we're thinking about these costs. I'm hearing a lot about how tourists can afford this. The people who may need a spot in the garage, maybe there's such a demand for spots that they could afford that. But this really should be set with a lens of looking at not just a majority of the people who utilize it downtown, but the most vulnerable who really need to be able to access these spaces. And with the higher cost, it is going to negatively impact many people. So I would really like that consideration to be at the forefront. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Susie. We got one hand on Zoom, and then I'm going to come back to the board because I think there's some decision-making to happen. So, Oscar, I'll come back to you very briefly afterwards. So I think it's Mr. Levenbach on Zoom.
That's correct. Thank you. A small question. I see these are given as hourly rates, but will parking with the kiosks be available for shorter increments, 10, 15 minutes?
Thanks
Yes.
for your question, Patrick. Did you catch it? Would parking be available for like short increments, like 10, 15 minutes?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, they are currently.
Okay.
So we don't require
It's just a
you
way to
to
measure.
park for
Yes.
2 hours, for example.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just make a clarification, as I understand it, that handicap placards aren't just reserved to handicap spots, as far as, and Patrick or John can correct me, but that they can pretty much park anywhere with a handicap placard, that they don't need to, and without having to pay for that service.
That's
And,
Yes.
and we discussed that at our last meeting.
Right.
Okay, thank you. Oscar, real quick.
Oscar Heller, Brattleboro, Chair of the Finance Committee. I will be quick. I know you don't disagree, but opportunities for public comment are pretty few and far between, so I don't know that the fourth person necessarily needs to be cut off from...
Go ahead.
I'm glad to see the board seems to be committing to the full recovery option. That's great. I think that's the right call. I think options 4 and 5 both make sense. Costs and benefits to Sunday, I think the benefits would outweigh it for me, but I think the health of our downtown and merchants are very important, and I know I always talk about other stuff, and I really do know that's important, but I usually seem to be following people who have already talked about that. So I just want to say, let's also be mindful that if we add parking on Sunday, we are removing a benefit. That person who's there all day may be someone who works on Sunday and used to be able to park for free and now is going to have to pay an additional cost. So it's not just a problem that is solved by expanding to Sunday. Somebody is losing something in that deal. So, but all in all, I think it's still worth it. And options 4 and 5.
Thanks, Oscar. And just so you know, not to be super defensive, we were sort of, the conversation was with the board, and then there was a hand over there, and I decided I would go and entertain it, and then we entertained this for a while, but I needed to bring things back here anyway, and we actually have 2 other things in this agenda item that we need to talk about as well. So, board, is there kind of some consensus forming around option 4? Elizabeth?
I would suggest that I make a motion
Okay.
to adopt the FY25 parking fund budget with revenues of $926,007, which is option 4, and expenses of $1,015,866, and to adopt the FY parking capital improvement plan with an annual set-aside of $170,000 for capital projects.
Okay. Thank you, Elizabeth. Discussion on that motion, please.
I have
Peter.
finished ruminating
Yes.
on option 4, and I believe I can reconcile that and move forward with option 4, with the caveat that this town is clear and concise about when these things go into effect. That we message it out accordingly so that nobody gets caught blindsided, going so far as to even put signs on the meters for the first month that this is in effect, or leave them there. So that, what's that? No meters. Like I said, no. Maybe for a while we leave the meters up so we can have a place to put signs. That's what I meant to say. But yeah, you know what I'm saying. I just, so that it's messaged so that nobody gets caught blindsided, and you know that we're not suffering that conversation for very long.
Okay, thank you. Richard?
I would just want to make a suggestion that we adopt number 4, option 4, that it be accompanied with something like a FAQ page or some kind of page with information about what this means for somebody parking downtown. Because I've heard a lot of misinformation already.
I'm shocked.
From people, for example, if it's a cashless option, then they're gonna have to pay credit card fees.
Right, and we're going to get to that.
Yeah.
So what we're trying to arrive at right now is how much revenue do we want to create in this budget? And this sounds like, there's some interest in option 4. You guys are both talking about getting good information out to the community. That is super important. So any other discussion on Liz's motion?
Well, then I have another question related to
Go for
that.
it.
If we adopt Liz's motion, I don't want the public to feel that they're shut out of this. I feel like we've had enough time to discuss this, but I'm just asking if this is too quick or it's okay.
I would answer that with, this is, we started this conversation 2 weeks ago. I know I've heard from a number of people on the topic. I've gotten emails. People have stopped me on the street to talk about it. I think, if we're dealing with adults in the conversations, prices don't stay stagnant. They don't go down. They tend to go up. And in order to make the biggest question, and I think Dick DeGray pointed out, is like, what is an enterprise fund and how does it work? That was the biggest thing. So, yeah, again, I'm good with 4.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Let me just speak about it for a second. So, this is a big change going to a Sunday day of parking, which, has some benefit, I think, in turnover of spots for downtown merchants. But as Oscar points out, it does also impact people that come downtown to work that previously would have parked for free that day. And some of those people that are parking downtown for free are also visiting our merchants and visiting our restaurants and so forth. And so, none of this stuff has, there's not a benefit to everybody here. There will be people that things will get a little bit harder for. I think that we have a responsibility to treat this fund as a fund that needs to pay for itself, right? So when you're talking about an enterprise fund, we're talking about something that raises fees to pay for itself. Otherwise, what we were looking at last time was, hey, we could actually make parking free everywhere. But unfortunately, there are like operation costs and maintenance costs that need to be paid for, and that cost would be borne by the taxpayer, whether you park downtown or not. And so that cost would be substantial, and we've decided that we don't want to do that. We are going to continue to fund the parking fund by user fees, and so we need to select fees that are appropriate. Option 4, I think, is reasonable. We'll give it a try, and this board will get an opportunity in a year's time to revisit and see if we did the right thing or not, and the community will tell us as well. Any other discussion on the motion that Liz has on the floor right now? Franz?
Yeah. As I said, I can live with any of these proposals. I don't think the differences among them are very important, quite honestly. People will adjust. They'll figure it out, do what they want to do, adapt their patterns of parking and living. So I see these as pretty much all one lump, one basket of proposals. I'm surprised that the board has so little interest in actually saving money on this, that this is, as far as I can recall, our first discussion ever of actually saving money on something. And to me, it would make sense to take a longer, harder look at that, which could be done if we adopt a budget in terms of allocating funding without deciding on a funding mechanism tonight. I don't see any real support for that among the board members, but I want to register that I think that would be a better approach, to take a really serious look at how can we save people money parking in Brattleboro instead of picking just one of this basket of deplorables.
Okay, thank you. Frick, you had your hand up, and then we're going to come back to the board for hopefully a decision on that motion.
Yeah, Fritz Bright, District 3 Squared. Just a quick question. I'm a little late to this conversation. It sounds like there's a move to eliminate cash entirely.
That's a question that we haven't taken up yet. It's next.
Okay. I would urge the board to maintain some sort of a cash option. Not everybody has a credit card, and not everybody's comfortable using their credit card under all circumstances. So.
Okay. I will remember that comment in a few minutes' time. So Liz has made a motion to adopt the FY25 parking fund budget with revenues of $926,007. and expenses of $1,015,866, and to adopt the FY25 parking capital improvement plan with an annual set aside of $170,000 for capital projects. Is there any further discussion on that motion? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That's 4-0. All those opposed? And I'm guessing that's an abstention then?
If you don't vote, that's called an abstention.
Thank you for my ethics and civics lesson. Yeah. Okay, so we have adopted a parking fund budget with a certain amount of revenue. Yay. And I'm glad that we did that because it needs to be in place for July 1. The next thing that we need to consider, and in fact, seeing as people are already so excited to talk about it, I will jump to this, is should this system be cashless? Patrick, is there some context that you want to provide about this? Or John?
John?
No, you.
Me?
Patrick.
Yep. Me. This has been something discussed more at the administration level than, coming up from staff. But we have been taking a look at the activities of our staff and have been wondering if we are putting them in some ways in harm's way. So we have individuals who work independently, carrying sometimes large buckets of coins and dollars out on their own, walking the streets. Are we setting them up for the potential to be victimized in a with a holdup of some kind? Secondly, that's a laborious task and one that could easily lead to workers' comp claims. I could say that in the working life of our longest employed parking enforcement officer, they've never been held up once, and they haven't, to the best of my knowledge, had a significant injury. But, we like to think about the working conditions of our employees and wondering if this is really something we should be asking the staff to do. And if we were to not ask the staff to do that, that would free up the staff to be able to do broader parking enforcement throughout the town, which is something, frankly, I think could be of benefit to the town and may come to help us in a new way should we need to adjust the parking ordinance in support of our trash collection. So it's an option for the board to consider. I think eventually there will come a day when cash is really antiquated. We may not be there today, but if we're there and we're willing to make that transition, now might be a good time.
I have a question.
Okay, thanks, Patrick. Liz?
So, Patrick, can this be staged? Like, if the decisions that we make tonight, can the cash, or, can we decide to keep the cash and, let's say, in a year, get rid of the cash? Or is that going to screw up your whole computerized kiosk system?
It just means when we install the new kiosks, they're going to come with cash accepting internal devices, as opposed to it would be a less expensive model if we said, oh, hey, forget about the bill acceptor and forget about the coin acceptor.
Mm-hmm. And so we could then take those same kiosks and change them in a year or so without too much expense?
Yeah, that's certainly doable.
Okay.
There would be expense, though.
It's also
there will be an expense.
Yeah, there'll be an expense to it, but there'll also be a savings, and the savings will be in those are the parts that break most frequently.
The cash parts
break. Yeah, the things that accept cash and coins and little rollers that take bills and all those things, those break frequently or more easily. So there'll be a savings in the effect that we don't have to replace those. And when we replace new kiosks, they won't have to come with them in the first place.
Okay. Thanks, Patrick. Other board members with questions about cashless or not? Richard?
For Patrick, if the enforcement people aren't dealing with money, physical money, it sounds to me like you're sort of implying that the revenue from fines could go up. And is there any sense of how many, how do I put this, how many people who park overtime are not getting fines? Do you have any sense of that kind of number?
You mean somebody who's, let's say, parking in a space, not paying for it, and not getting a ticket?
Right.
I have no idea.
Okay.
I would imagine there's a certain amount of that going on.
But you're also, if they don't have to spend time walking around with buckets of money, they're going to make more money they're going to write more fines.
I think that's reasonable, yeah.
I think that was the experience with the new meters that took credit cards, that the fines went down, right?
We want a system that is easy for people to pay for parking, right?
Yep.
The kiosk system, an app, credit cards, cash will make it easy for people to pay for parking. The question of do we know how many people park and don't pay? We don't, because I don't think that we should be rushing to move to a system that eliminates cash. Quite frankly, nobody's going to love this rate increase. Very few people care about whether we're really funding this enterprise fund adequately. Most people will care about, hey, my parking went up. Their water rates went up. Their tax bill went up. It's a tough time for many people in our community. And I have many emails and phone calls from people saying, please don't eliminate cash from our system. And I don't see a good argument for us doing that. I think that we can do the people a solid and say, you can still pay with quarters, nickels, dimes, what have you, for now. And if the board down the road wants to consider moving to a cashless system, fine. But I'm not in favor of it.
So I'm just going to weigh in on a cashless system and how I'm impacted by credit cards and people who come into the shop and pay with their watch, right? Which I don't understand at all. But I can tell you that I can take in thousands of dollars and none of it's in cash. Now, I also understand that that's different from just running into Amy's to get a cup of coffee and throwing a quarter in the meter, just enough time for you to go grab that coffee, come back out without having to futz with an app. And I have also appreciated being able just to pull a quarter out just to park for a moment so I can get a cup of coffee. So I guess either way we go is okay with me. I'm a little old and troglodyte-y, so I like having a cash option. I do. But I also see a long-term way down the road of cash is not king anymore. Pulling out your debit card, your credit card, paying with your watch, your phone is sort of the way we're going. Mm-hmm. So at some point in time, if it's not right now, we will need to move in that direction. It's inevitable.
Great. Richard?
And sort of going along with that, I mean, if we have a system that's not cashless, but it offers the app and the credit card, I have to believe that we're going to see a significant drop in the amount of money that's cash that's actually being used, which might be a good indication of the popularity of cash or no cash.
Franz, Liz?
I think the reason to eliminate cash from the system would be to create efficiencies in use of our staff. I think that would be the reason to eliminate it. If we're not entertaining that as a possibility, then I don't see a reason to eliminate cash.
I actually think that moving to the kiosk system will create efficiencies because instead of collecting cash from every single meter, they are collecting cash from a couple of kiosks.
Yeah, that's what I think too.
Nice. Liz?
Well, we shouldn't get too far afield from the fact that we are literally nickeling and diming the public. Mm-hmm. So.
Oh man, you've been waiting a long time for that.
No, it just came to me. But I just think that in the spirit of compromise and all the changes that are taking place, that to not change this at this time would be a benefit to the public. And so I'm in favor of cash.
Okay. Members of the public who wish to speak on this matter? Cash, no cash. Frick has already spoken. Dick?
I certainly support the cash option. And you look at the collecting of the cash, we're going to be going from, 160 or 190 meters down to 9 kiosks. So you're going to cut that time. That's going to take no time to collect the money. And because of the spacing, most likely you're going to get back in your car and drive up to the next kiosk. Certainly appreciate the fact that the administration is looking out for their employees. But
thank you.
And we haven't had a robbery, not to say that one won't happen, but if we feel that we're that desperate, then we need to have officers downtown patrolling and more cameras up for more security. So I hope you go with the cash option. And again, the next topic you're going to talk about, in a year, you might want to make some changes when you find out how much revenue you do bring in on a Sunday. So, and this next option would allow you to, what you're going to talk about next, to do that quickly rather than wait 3 months.
Yeah, great. So it doesn't sound like there's a lot of appetite for cashless. We want to make a motion on this, vote on it. I don't mind it.
I'll make
Richard?
the motion.
We're going to do it.
Okay, Peter? Just for clarity's sake.
So I'll
there isn't one in here, so
there's not.
You're going off book.
So I'm freelance.
Yeah.
All right. So I will motion that we adopt a both cash and cashless, or a cash system along with being able to pay cashless as well.
Okay, great. Peter's made a motion to maintain cash in the parking system as well as provide other options. Any final discussion on that motion? Okay. Any discussion from members of the public? See a hand raised on Zoom that perhaps is raised in response to this question?
A little suspicious about this one.
Well, we'll give it a try. It's a public meeting.
Been some fairly colorful stuff popping up there.
Yeah, I try not to look.
That's a strategy.
Yeah, that's one strategy. Samantha, if you'd like to join us, I have a question about our cash in the parking system, perhaps?
She is muted.
Yeah.
She's been sent several
Okay.
requests.
All right, we're going to move on. So, board, there's a motion in front of you to retain cash in our parking system. And no further discussion. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, very good. Well done. We are moving on to the question of how to set parking rates. Should they continue to be in Chapter 16 of the ordinances in detail, or should the ordinance simply say the select board will set parking rates once a year and go here to look for it? That's the gist of it, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Is there a motion for that?
There's no motion. All right. We might need to take a break in a second. We'll see how we're doing. Patrick is quite busy. John, is there anything you want to say about this question here?
Under attack.
Yeah. People have got nothing better to do. Board, any questions about this?
My
The
question
town attorney
is,
has reviewed it.
well, shouldn't we have some information on that? Are there advantages or disadvantages?
The advantage is speed. So if we retain our current code of ordinance,
that. I'm wondering if there's a more detailed analysis that we shouldn't look at before making this decision.
well, would anybody on the town administration like to offer an answer to that question, or we can bring it back for another day? It doesn't have to be decided right now. Patrick is very busy.
It would be
maintaining the security of our meeting. John?
It would be great to know what you would be looking for, Franz, exactly.
Just that I'm unfamiliar with thinking this through, I mean, on the one hand, it seems like, hey, great, let's make it more efficient. But, I'm just thinking back, well, for other funds where we make financial decisions, we tend to do it, well, it doesn't have to be through an ordinance, but I don't know. I just wouldn't want us move to something that doesn't work for some reason that I haven't thought of and we haven't talked about. Mm-hmm. That's all. If Bob gave an opinion and said, well, there's really no downside to this and this is what they do all over the state and stuff like that, then I'd say, great. And, I'm willing to go along with it now. It just seems like we're kind of short-circuiting the process a little bit in terms of making sure that we've checked all the boxes and covered the bases, et cetera.
Right. And so on page 29 of the backup material, it does speak in the paragraph ordinance considerations about the town attorney's opinion on this. It's not a strong opinion. It says town attorney Bob Fisher has suggested that language could be inserted into the ordinance that says the select board shall review and adjust rates as needed on an annual basis. So it's clear that the town attorney has given this consideration and is saying that it's possible.
I think we have fee schedules for things like rec and parks that are done outside of ordinance. I think there's other things that we do that are in ordinance. It's really whether you want a simple approach here or one that's more.
So you really don't see any particular downside to doing it that way?
I really
don't. Okay,
but
that's good enough for me.
But I don't think it's that big a deal either. So whichever the board wants to do.
Okay. Other questions on this topic? Richard?
Well, I feel there may be a downside in terms of public accountability, transparency. If we make it so that the board can increase the parking, the cost of parking in a different way than we do it now, the process will happen more quickly, and I think we run the risk of not having enough public engagement.
Okay. Yeah, that's a fair comment. Liz?
I have a motion, if you'd like to have one for discussion.
Let's have it for discussion.
All right. I move that language be inserted into the ordinance that says that the select board shall review and may adjust rates as needed on an annual basis, and these rates shall be made available to the public in the town manager's office and also posted on the town's website.
Thanks, Liz. Would you like to speak to that motion?
I'm in favor of this. I think it's a simple change, but a convenient one, and I think that the public will be afforded the same public discussion that the select board has every first and third Tuesday.
Okay, so Peter?
Question, would that come in a form of like we do, like a first reading, second reading?
Not necessarily. It could be done more. It could be done in one go. The first reading and the second reading is because of ordinances, right? We're required to conduct a first reading and a second reading. With this, it could be done in one meeting. I actually think. Does that answer? Did you want to keep going?
Well, no. I'm asking. Would that be a way to address what Richard's thinking?
Yeah.
And put it out there for response, because I mean we can talk these things right into a circular drain, mm-hmm. right? And so I understand the efficiency. Well, I mean we can.
Yes, we can talk for a bit.
Let's face it. Yeah. We're a culture that loves to get caught up in the minutia. So but this is an important thing, and I think everybody should have a fair shot of weighing in, mm-hmm. If they so choose. So, is it possible to first and second read this thing?
So I think that if we wanted to do that, we should just retain how it is done right now. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just a little bit slower. It does afford the public quite a lot more opportunity to weigh in and say, hey, we don't like this. And I think we haven't changed parking rates while we've been on the board, I don't think.
When was the last time they were changed, Patrick? Do you know?
It was a change.
2011.
I'm sorry?
At least 2011, right?
No, there was a change in roughly 5 years ago. A minor change. I would describe it as a very minor change, and it was intended to offset the cost of credit card processing with the transition to smart meters.
Right. So I just kind of wonder if the board could, keep its current, practice of having this be codified in an ordinance, but be revisiting on an annual basis and checking against, the fund's performance. If you know that it's coming every year, then that little lag time that it takes to build an ordinance isn't so much of a problem. John?
I think it's really just an efficiency board. So, we could bring a fee schedule with the budget. You could consider it and approve it or not every year. Instead, with this, we've had now 2 conversations about this topic. We're going to have 2 subsequent conversations about this topic at upcoming meetings. And it's just whether you want to spend time in your meeting going over a topic 4 times before you finish with it, or whether you want to build some efficiencies into the process. I don't think it really matters too much from the administration standpoint. It's really how you want to spend your time in these meetings.
Wait, we're going to have 2 more conversations about this?
Yeah.
So thank you, John. Franz?
I would just point out that we can always have this as a discussion at 2 meetings, consecutive or otherwise, even though it's possible maybe to pass it in one go at 1 meeting. We don't have to do it that way. If it's not an ordinance, means we have to do it that way. Mm-hmm. This way, we still could do it at 2 consecutive meetings, give people a chance to weigh in, and I'd be comfortable enough with that.
Okay, thank you. Members of the public who wish to weigh in on this question, this arcane question, Richard? Mr. DeGray?
I think when you put your agenda out there, people contact you. There's been a conversation last week with not part of the ordinance that was adopted. To me, all you're doing is expediting implementation. So what you're doing now is going to take 3 months to take effect. So you've lost 3 months of revenue. Mm-hmm. With the new system, you're going to have public comment. You're going to have a conversation about the rates. You're going to have information you can discuss. And then after you take your vote, July 1, if you make any changes, the implementation goes into effect. I think that's a good thing, rather than the lag time of 3 months. I'm not feeling like, after listening to you, that the public is going to be excommunicated from the conversation. We're going to be here. I'm going to know the parking budget's on the agenda. I'm going to come, and if I feel like I need to speak, I'm going to speak. So it's not like you're going to do anything without public input. And the upside to me is, if you do adopt something, it happens at the start of the new fiscal year. So I hope you support this.
Great, thank you. Tom?
Yeah, I like the idea. I'm in support of building it into an annual budget review for consideration. One way to look at it is, besides a minor change that Patrick described a little bit that was made 5 years ago, I looked at an inflation calculator from 2011 to now. $1 or $1.43 is what $1 was worth then, so a 43% increase. If you add up the fees and permits of option 4 and divide that by the fees and permits of the status quo, it's a 44% increase. So all we're doing in total is just keeping it up to date with the way it was in 2011. And if that was just done yearly, and the rationale mainly was just keeping things up to date, it would be more bite-sized and wouldn't be this big, on average, 44% jump that surprises people. But in effect, it's just bringing it back to what it was. Some of the categories, though, you've doubled, and some of the categories you've just increased by 25%. I hope all those choices, were made with good reason. But You could have just taken, the status, the options we had, and just each year increased it by inflation, and maybe that's the way you'll do it going forward. But I think that would be really palatable for people.
Great. Thanks, Tom, for that feedback. Any other questions from the public about this matter? People on Zoom? No? Okay, so Liz has made a motion, which I will try and get right. I think what she said was that language should be inserted into the ordinance that says that the Select Board shall review and may adjust rates as needed on an annual basis, and that these rates shall be made available to the public in the town manager's office and also posted on the town website. Any final discussion on that?
That's what I said.
So if it gets, are we going to pass the first reading of the ordinance tonight?
No.
No, okay. Then that's perfect.
Yeah. Okay, so all those in favor of that motion that I just read, please raise their hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, passes 5-0. So we have attended to all of our parking fund related business. Took a little bit longer, but I don't mind because I think it's an important discussion. Our next item is a closeout public hearing for the DeWitt block, but it's 8 o'clock, and I'm going to say that we should take a little break for 5 minutes for bodies and so forth. We'll come back at 8:03. So we're going to resume our meeting. The next item is new business, item A, which is the DeWitt Grant closeout public hearing. It's my first time doing a public hearing. I believe the key component of a public hearing is we need to open this public hearing, and thus it is so. And so we have, I believe, oh Lord, I just lost my piece of paper. Thank you. Megan, oh no, I lost it in the Sudol from M&S Development on behalf of Community Development Support here to talk to us about their project. We can hear from the public's thoughts about it, and then we'll hear from the board briefly, and then we'll close it out. And you've got about 10, 15 minutes. And we got Sky Morse on the computer. Hi, Sky.
All right.
All right. Go for it.
Yeah, and so I'm here from M&S Development. So we were the consultants hired by Community Development Support to administer this grant, administer the development. And Sky, if you want to talk a little bit about the project, I will turn it over to you right now. Since you're here.
Okay. Yeah, sure. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, so the grant was intended to facilitate the creation of 15 affordable housing units and the rehabilitation of what we all refer to as the Snell block or the Snell building down on Flat Street, formerly the DeWitt block, was the DeWitt family's grocery warehouse built in 1900 and used for various purposes and then not used for at least a decade. And we used the grant funds along with many other funding sources to fully rehabilitate the building. As I said, create 15 new affordable housing units. A mix of studios, 1 bedrooms and 2 bedrooms, as well as a co-working space, which is recently opened, called Busy Town. And the project is complete. The project is a success, and it could not have happened without the support from the town. So thank you very much. Are there any questions? Anything else you want me to update on?
Thanks, Sky. That's good. Megan, did you want to add anything?
Oh, no, Sky was spot on.
Okay. Well, this is a public hearing about the use of those funds for that project. Are there any members of the public that wish to speak on this matter? Okay. Are there any members of the Select Board that wish to speak on this matter?
I'd like to ask a question, if I may.
Yes, you may.
I'm wondering if there's anything in particular that you'd share with us that you learned during this process, in particular converting commercial to residential space. Is there anything that you look forward to in the future based on having done this now?
I think Sky will be the great one to address this.
Oh, Sky, you're muted, so Patrick didn't need to send you that request.
Great. Thank you. We learned a lot. We learned not to do that again. It was really, really difficult. It took a long time. It took 5 years in total from start of development to end of construction, and it's just been extremely onerous. The programs that we had to use, there are a lot of strings that made things difficult. And we were building in the pandemic era, and our costs were just out of control. So that was really difficult. Now that's
go in there.
We're going to do it again.
So, you can hear me.
Yeah, so we're going to be taking on one of the buildings in the SD Organ complex next. So, and we will be looking to you all for your support on that as well. Interesting. I look forward to hearing from you about that.
Well, you just said the lesson you learned was not to do it again. It sounds like you've forgotten already.
Have any other options, sir? We have to build housing on a community, and this is the only way we figured out how to do it. So, as hard as it may be.
That would help with some of the obstacles you faced? I mean, yes. I mean, any other procedural things where the town government can help out?
The town government is not really an impediment. I think the idea that we had explored a couple years ago of redeveloping town properties with that could be really, I think, something interesting to continue to look at. But otherwise, the town. Here's one thing. This is one thing that's actually very exciting. The governor just vetoed H687.
This guy mentioned a bill that the governor
for on property taxes.
Yeah, we're losing your audio again, Sky. And maybe you want to try turning your video off. That sometimes helps. And unless you come back in the next couple of seconds, I think we're going to see if there's any further questions from the board or the public. Okay, so any further questions from the board? I just want to kind of comment in my professional capacity. I've helped with some paperwork that helps people that were experiencing homelessness get into this safe and affordable housing at the DeWitt block. And I can tell you that, there's a real benefit there. And this is a building that has mixed income levels. Mm-hmm. So it's, that's a good thing too. And so I'm just really grateful that folks like you are engaged in these difficult and costly projects. And I'm grateful that the town was able to participate in, whatever way we could to help make this happen. So thank you for that work. Any members of the public that want to make a final comment before we close out this grant and public hearing? Okay, hearing none. Let's take a motion. Elizabeth.
First, I just think that we should mention what we're doing here, and that is we're closing out. And but this little paragraph in our backup, I think, is important for the public to understand that we supported the application to the Vermont Community Development Program in the amount of $542,920, and then further. The town's revolving loan fund, the select board authorized a loan in the amount of $150,000 And then we upped that, we doubled that to $300,000. So I just, before we close it out and everybody says nice things, I think it's important for everybody to understand the magnitude of the state and local funds that were put forward.
Yes. Good. Thank you.
And now I'll be happy to make a motion if you would like.
Yes, keep going, and I'll come to you in a second, Patrick.
All right, I move that we close out the DeWitt grant.
Great, thank you. Patrick Moreland.
I was just going to say, no motions required.
Oh, well, our backup material suggests otherwise. It won't hurt for us to close it out, right, with a motion?
Very good.
Okay.
Belt and suspenders.
Thanks so much. Liz has made a motion to close out the DeWitt grant. Patrick said we didn't need to. Anyone want to make any further comments on it? No? Okay. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye. Thank you for your work, all involved. Okay, closed out. Next up, we've got the Winston-Prouty grant closeout public hearing. Chloe Leary.
Thank you, Mike.
Please come and join us. And maybe we could just, I didn't really do this with the last one, and I probably should have, just provide a little bit of context for what this is. So the Select Board authorized a grant application on behalf of Winston-Prouty to the Vermont Community Development Program in the amount of $50,000. And those funds were used to hire an engineer. I'm just reading. Don't think I know this. Were used to hire an engineer to evaluate the privately owned water and sewer infrastructure on the campus to determine the investment required to construct hundreds of additional housing units. In addition, the analysis looked at what might be required off campus within the public system to facilitate such development. The project is now complete, and Chloe Leary is here from Winston-Prouty to discuss the project and for us to close it out and hear from the public. And then you're going to give a presentation after that. And John has reminded me to open the public hearing. So I deem this public hearing open.
Great.
Chloe.
Thank you, Daniel. We received the town applied for the grant in 2021, so we are really thrilled that it's done here in 2024. And Christine Haskins from the Dufresne Group, that was the engineering firm that we hired to complete the study. She is here and can speak to the details about the conclusions of the study. So I'm going to let her speak to that.
Great, thank you. Chrissy, if you are unmuted and ready to go, we are ready to hear you.
Great, all set. Thank you. Good evening. I'm going to keep this brief and high level, which means I'm going to skip over some of the detail in the report. If you have any specific questions, please feel free to ask. The water sewer evaluation is one piece of a larger planning effort to add a significant amount of housing to the Winston-Prouty campus. The purpose of the study was to evaluate the feasibility of water supply and wastewater disposal for the additional development and to develop preliminary concepts and cost estimates. The proposed development would increase campus demand and flows to approximately 90,000 gallons per day, which brings us to the first question we needed to answer. Do the town's water and sewer systems have the capacity to serve the proposed development? The answer to this is based on the permitted capacity of the water and wastewater treatment facilities compared to the current average and max day system demands and flows. For both water and sewer, the answer is yes, the town has the ability to serve the proposed development. We performed a desktop analysis of the existing utility conditions. Starting with the campus infrastructure, the sewer is a gravity collection system connecting to the town sewer on Maple Street. There are no known issues with the campus sewer infrastructure. The campus water system connects to the town water on Maple Street and extends into campus with a ductile iron water main. Due to low pressures, there is a booster pump in Thomas Hall serving campus. However, it does appear that pressures at the higher elevations on campus are still low, so like the top floor of Holton Hall. For the town's infrastructure, because the water needs to come through the town's infrastructure to serve the development, and the wastewater needs to leave through the town's infrastructure. So for the town's infrastructure, the sewer extends from Maple Street down to the wastewater plant via a gravity collection system, no pump stations. 2 areas of the collection system were identified for further investigation, including confirmation of pipe slopes and flow metering. That was not part of our scope on this project, so that's something that still needs to be done. These are areas along the 16-inch whetstone interceptor and the 24-inch interceptor to the wastewater plant. The evaluation there showed some potential hydraulic capacity concerns. However, it was based on several assumptions. Based on input from town staff, it is believed that the town's collection system can handle the additional flows. The water main serving campus, the town's water main, from the water treatment plant to Maple Street is 8 to 16-inch ductile and cast iron pipes. The town water system can provide up to approximately 1,500 gallons a minute of water service to campus while maintaining compliance with all regulations. The water pressure from the town system is compliant with regulations, which requires a minimum of 35 psi at the connection to the town's main, which is down on Maple Street. The low pressures experienced on campus are related to the elevation gain between Maple Street and the campus buildings. We looked at alternatives for the infrastructure on campus and to resolve these deficiencies. On the town side, we have no known deficiencies on the sewer infrastructure, but we will be confirming that with further field investigation. At this time, we're assuming no improvements are required for the town sewer. On the campus side, there are also no known deficiencies in the sewer system. However, the existing piping may be impacted by new buildings or may need to be moved for regulatory compliance or project efficiency. The sewer system would also need to be extended on campus to serve the additional development. In regard to the low water pressure, a new booster pump station on campus near Maple Street would be required. 2 other alternatives to resolve low water pressure on the town side of the infrastructure were discussed with the team, but we did not detail those in the report due to the costs. These include the replacement of the 3 million gallon water storage tank at the Pleasant Valley treatment plant to be replaced at a higher elevation, or replacement of thousands of feet of water main from Pleasant Valley treatment plant to Green Meadow and Country Hill with larger diameter piping. We roughly estimated these alternatives at $10 million each for total project cost, which includes engineering, construction, and contingencies. The pump station alternative was far more cost effective, so we did further that in the report. It would need to be designed for full build out of campus, but could be constructed in phases by adding pumps or increasing pump sizes as development progresses. Similar to the sewer system, the water main on campus is not deficient, but may require replacement due to conflicts with new buildings, regulatory compliance, and design and construction efficiency, and would also require extension to serve the proposed buildings. The estimated total project cost as of 2024 ranges from about 6.4 to 7.1 million for water and sewer combined, depending on what the site layout ends up being. And that does include a 30% contingency and the engineering. Some of the costs, such as mobilization, demobilization, restoration, etc., may be duplicated in the costs from the architect for the full project. So Mark Westa is looking at all of the costs to remove any duplicated costs in the overall project estimates. And as the project progresses through planning and design, we will be looking at efficiencies of water and sewer designs to identify potential cost-saving modifications and phasing options. And that's once the site plan is finalized. So that's the quick summary, and happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Chrissy. Even at the high level, that was still like, ooh, that's a lot of information right there. Members, because it's a public hearing, I'm going to go to the public first. Members of the public with questions on the use of these funds for this feasibility study or the feasibility study itself.
Let me just ask a question.
Are you a member of the public?
No. I'm asking a question about your opening this to the public.
Yeah.
The point here is to close out the grant.
Correct.
So questions about the future of the wastewater aren't necessarily germane.
So thank you for your little challenge there. I would say that from what I've read, that this is a hearing about funds that were granted to this organization through the town, and that some of what they're hearing is hearing about how those funds were used and the public commenting on it. Is it not? I'm looking at you, Patrick.
Yes, sir.
Because I know that you know a lot about these things.
I would say that the HUD, who is the federal agency from which these funds first started, pays close attention to, if there was an audience of people here who showed up to say, this is horrible, please, don't ever do this again, they'll pay attention to that.
Right. And once we've heard them, we'll then close out the grant. But we will hear from the board as well. I want to offer members of the public a chance to speak, first of all. Seeing no interest. Members of the board who wish to speak. Elizabeth.
I would just like to say that I'm glad that this grant was given, and I'm happy that this report was conducted. And as ever, we think the world of Chrissy and the Dufresne Group, so I thank them for their service. And I feel that there's positive outcomes for the overall development of the Winston-Prouty, which I'm also happy to hear.
Great. And we're going to have a little more of an overview about that project
later.
In our next agenda item. Patrick?
I'd like to throw in my 2 cents.
Okay.
I think one of the things that makes development difficult anywhere are unknowns. And I think the real success of this particular planning grant and this particular project was to take at least one piece of a very large puzzle and turn it from completely unknown to known. So that's a step in the right direction for a complicated development project such as the one you're going to be hearing about in a little bit.
Yep. Thank you. Franz?
I would like to chime in too and say I don't read a lot of engineering studies, but this seems to me a very thoroughly performed, eminently readable, and highly informative study that will, to me, this has accomplished the goals of the allocation that was made and will provide us with the information we need for the future.
Will provide Winston-Prouty with the information they need.
And us too.
Yes.
And all of us.
Yeah. Great. Thank you, Franz. Peter, Richard, anything to say on this? No? Okay. Chrissy, I appreciate the presentation. Obviously, all of the labor, there's a lot of labor here. And so, unless there's any further comment from the public, I think we will take a motion, Patrick, because it's on our material here. Would somebody like to make it?
To find it?
Can I nominate somebody to make it? Elizabeth.
I move to close out the Winston-Prouty grant.
Wonderful. Elizabeth has made a motion to close out the Winston-Prouty grant. Any final discussion on that? Seeing none, all those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That's 5-0. It is closed out. It's done, that particular grant. And now we're going to move on to our next item on the agenda, which is the Winston-Prouty Housing Project Update. And Chloe Leary is already sitting at the table.
Ready.
So, Chloe, there's a big presentation here. We probably can't get into all of it.
I'm not going to go through the
What would you like to tell us?
presentation. That's just really for background information. I'm going to pull out highlights from that and then
Thanks, Chrissy.
open to questions because that's probably where it's more germane. So in that presentation, I think probably the last time a lot of people heard from us, we had done master planning, we did an initial design, we presented it to neighbors, we were very excited about it, and sort of to Patrick's point, you have to start somewhere, and so that was our starting point. And we got feedback from lots of different sources, like, wow, that looks expensive. So we sort of the next step after that was finished in April of last year. In August of last year, we hired a development consultant to help us. And I guess I want to say we were able to do master planning because of the support of the town. So to acknowledge that we really feel strongly about, and from a lot of other entities, and that community support has been so important. And we've not only done a master plan and the water sewer study, we've done a lot of other studies: environmental assessment, a traffic study, site survey, wetlands. There's a lot of, and there's a list in the presentation about all of the background information we've done. So we've made a lot of progress in trying to find out the unknowns. And the water sewer study was a really big piece of it. So we hired a development consultant to help us answer the question, could we do this development using debt and equity and not some of the ways that people fund housing in Vermont, specifically through something like low-income housing tax credits. So you heard Sky say, wow, we had a really complicated capital stack and it was really, it's challenging. And so can we simplify a very complicated project and figure out how to do it differently? Part of the reason to do that is some of those funding streams are competitive, and we don't want to jump in and compete with the housing trusts, for instance, or other housing developers by gobbling up the 9% low-income housing tax credits. And another reason is because our vision really is that anybody should be able to live at the Prouty campus, and that means people who might be at 60% or lower of area median income and people who are higher. Really, the housing continuum needs to be healthy, and some of those funding streams limit who can live there, how many people in certain income brackets can live there. We're really trying to create a truly mixed income neighborhood that's broadly mixed income. And so that was another reason we wanted to look at how can we pay for it in a way that's a little bit different and not constraining. So the question was, can we do that? And the answer is, yeah, we think we can do that. And the development consultant we hired said, if you look at modular construction and so the initial plan, for those who didn't know, were sort of these big sweeping buildings with mass timber, really beautiful. But her work was really working with, and I think it was New England Homes, don't quote me, but really drilling down to, are there multifamily units with modular construction that we can bring in that would cost less, still accomplish the mission, use the space well, get the density we're looking for? And the answer was, yeah, we think we could get units for $263,000 per unit, and that's hard and soft costs for those who follow that sort of thing. Somebody's laughing. I'm sure if Sky's still listening, he's laughing. That's a very low cost. You might know that units at this point are between $500,000 and $600,000 for development. So what I would say is, again, in the spirit of learning, what we found out is there probably is a different way to do this, and maybe it's not going to be $263,000 a unit, but even if it's $300,000 a unit, we might be ahead of the game. It will always likely require some form of subsidy, so that's something that's on our minds as we think about our capital strategy, but really trying to figure out, can we do this in a way that accomplishes our vision, gets the density we're looking for. And for those who aren't familiar, we're really talking about the main part of campus. The campus is 180 acres. It's beautiful, and we're not going to build all across the campus. This is really about you being where the infrastructure is already, and having a really sort of building a neighborhood essentially where it's already developed. So protecting trees and nature and view and all of that. And so that was it was a really good thing to know. It's like, okay, we think we can move forward to the next iteration of what we want to do, and do we really want 300 units of the same kind of housing on campus? So I will share that our team struggled with that a little bit. I know there's lots of ways to make that look different, but where we are right now is working with the architects who did the Homes for All toolkit. So UTL Architects out of Boston worked with the Agency of Commerce and Community Development to create this sort of small-scale development for towns to do infill. So they've been in Vermont and working in Vermont, and they are now on the team helping us think about how we might do a little more mix and match, some of different kinds of housing to meet different needs, so that it's not all just this one sort of cookie-cutter way of being. So we are close to having the next conceptual design to share with neighbors, with the town, and sort of get feedback on that so that we can move forward with finalizing design, understanding the water sewer is really, it really is a big piece of the puzzle. And it just feels like things are sort of coming together to make it more concrete. It's been this big vision, big idea. I will say, some people say, oh, that Prouty project is already happening. I'm here to tell you it will happen, but it's not happening yet. We still need support. How are we going to pay for this is really what's on our minds. And so, we're sort of scrapping it together for now and making it work. And I'm happy to share some really great news that we got on Friday, which is that Senator Sanders' office included our project in congressionally designated spending for $2 million for sewer water upgrades. So part of that $6 to $7 million theoretically could come through federal funding. And I will also say, very aware of the fact that it's a presidential election year and appropriations might not approve it. So we're not going to hold our breath for that, but I would say that we really appreciate the senator acknowledging the importance of this kind of project. So looking for figuring out ways to, like that, pull the money together to keep moving. Right now, I would say the ask is, not the ask, but sort of what I'm, the next 6 months really finishing out the design and figuring out what the capital strategy is, sort of so consultants to do that. People don't like to pay for pre-development money. It's like the soft cost. So, $120,000 to $150,000 to get us through the next part of 2024, and then get us to, and this is in the packet, sort of the schematic design, engineering, permitting, some of those big concrete costs. That's like the million to, $1.5 to $2 million. So if we can get to that point, that will buy us time to figure out how are we going to pay for some of those bigger things. And there is funding, I think, for more of that, some of those concrete costs. So that is where we are right now in terms of timeline, that if we finalize this last design, we know what the schematic is, it'll help us put hard concrete numbers to things. And then people often ask me, like, what's the timeline? And I say, I hope that we are putting a shovel in the ground in 2025. I'm not sure what the shovel is going to be doing, maybe some water sewer upgrades, but I think we really just have a sense of like needing to move forward and keep the momentum going. Many of you have probably heard me say this before, that it's, while we own the property and we have control over it, we really see it as a community asset, and we need the community to be behind this and helping us do it. I think we have a unique value proposition in a way, in that it is so close to town. We have site control. These are some of the barriers that people have to development. And if we can, sort of coalesce around this project, I think that's what will help us move forward. So while we might be taking the lead and shepherding it, it's really, I see it as our community's project. This campus is a community asset, and we are stewarding it to its next iteration with values that I think are important, but we can't do it alone. So that's my pitch around that. I do want to address the fact that the number one concern that we have heard from people, so some people might say, I don't want that many people living in my neighborhood, but that's really about traffic. So the last bit I will talk about is the traffic study that sort of talks about volume and math and whether or not the roadway can handle the traffic. And I think that the conclusion is probably, but the issue that is that there's a problem now with traffic on Maple, I think specifically with traffic speed. And so people are saying, oh my gosh, if more people move in, there's more traffic and it'll be, it'll be worse than it is now. I think that the report talks about, there are lots of ways to do traffic calming. And I think actually a project this size has the chance of contributing to a solution, because something's going to have to change anyway. So, thinking about building for the future, building for ways to not have so many cars. So even, we're even talking about what are the parking requirements going to be? If we're trying to build for, 2050, does everybody need a car? Can we do car sharing? The mover already comes on campus, public transportation, bicycles, bike sharing. So there are ideas out there that I think we can build into this project that will help ameliorate some of what is already a problem. So that's not a magic answer, but I do, when people bring up the speed of traffic, I say it is a problem now, and I think the town is aware of it. There are other initiatives that I think we can, work with in conjunction with this project that will actually help us make a difference on that front. So I actually feel like that's a great opportunity to address that issue. And again, I don't know what the answer is. I know there are possibilities that feel promising. So, but other than that, I think everybody's been touched by the housing crisis, and everybody knows somebody who didn't take a job here because they couldn't find housing, or somebody whose kids can't come back and live here unless they move back in with you. But that's another story. So I think it means that that there's a lot of support, and I hope that we are a trusted community partner, and people will help make this believe in what we're trying to do and help make it real. That's my very quick update.
Thanks,
I'm
Chloe.
wide open to questions.
Can I just ask a clarifying question first of all, because I don't think it was said. How many units are we talking about, and how many people will that house?
That's a great question. So we're talking about 300 units right now, and that's a mix of studio, 1 and 2 bedroom. And I think so maybe it's 2.25. Like I don't know what that multiplier is, but something like. Or 1 point, I'm not sure. So
I think sometimes in this community we've talked a lot about number of units, but we forget that actually there's usually more than one person in a unit.
Yeah.
And so we're talking probably about 500 people in this community that can have better housing than they currently have, and also bring in new people into the community and all of the wonderful things that happen when we have more housing available.
And I think that, our housing study from 2021 identified the need for 500 units.
Right.
And I'm sure it's only gotten worse.
Yep.
And the other thing that I really, and this was several years ago, realizing that, again, that housing continuum opening up is important. So, there are folks living out in Newfane in a 5-bedroom house with 10 acres who don't want to live there anymore. So creating options will actually free up homes for other people who are ready for their starter home, or somebody who is in their first apartment who's ready for the next iteration of their life. So that concept of contributing to a healthy housing continuum is, I think, really important. I really want people to understand that we want our project to do that, so we might. Yes, it's affordable in the sense of we want it to be affordable for a lot of people. It's not affordable just for the segment of people that everybody's welcome. So, but it's really contributing to the health of the housing continuum in our community that feels important.
Great, thank you. Board members with questions. Richard.
I have a question about the logistics of a project of this size. Would you not put a shovel in the ground until you have a commitment for the funding for the whole project? Or would you, say, for example, construct the water and sewer portion with the hope of getting more money to finish the project? How would you do that?
Yeah, the way we've been thinking about that, Richard, is that, of course, it's going to be in phases. Nobody's going to plop down 300 units of housing. So, but a little concurrently. So hopefully having a sense of the design, the number of units, getting the water sewer started and thinking about what phase 1 might be. And somebody smarter than me is going to figure out where that would be on campus. I mean, we have a general design, but I think, I think also success begets success, so that attracting funding for a phase 1 would help then identify funding for phase 2. So if we wait until we have funding for the whole big project, and again, they're very experienced developers in the back of my head saying, I don't know what you're doing, but I think we have to keep moving and sort of do it in phases. So that's how we think of it.
So phase 1 could be the water and sewer.
Yes, water and sewer, and I think concurrently, hopefully adding. But yes, that's a great way to think of it. Sure, let's get that done and see how that happens. And we need to improve water and sewer anyway, so let's make that happen.
Thanks. Other board members with questions? Liz?
Thanks, Chloe. I believe you do have the community support that you hope for. My question is really just about this mixed income community. There was a lot of discussion in this presentation about how you could get a lower cost unit, which is wonderful. But I'm assuming that when you talk about mixed income, you're talking about having some more expensive units, some middle income units, and some lower cost. So that whole range will be part of the neighborhood that you're creating. Yes. I think there was a lot of emphasis on the low income, which is fine, but it just, people need to keep in mind that there'll be all ranges, and that's what makes the project work.
Yes, that's a great point, and there's a sample in the presentation of what the rents could look like at various levels for various incomes. That sort of demonstrates that point. And when people talk about mixed income, it's often like, well, as long as 80% of the units are for people 80% of AMI or below, area median income or below, then that's good. So 20% workforce market rate, 80% for everybody else. And I think that that's probably a little bit out of balance. There's a project in Winooski that got to 50-50. And that was a little challenging, and I don't know what our project would be. I would like it to be skewed a little more towards market rate and workforce, because the research actually shows that that kind of mix is healthier, leads to better equity and educational outcomes for people, for instance. So I think, even weighted depending on how, and then funding streams. So even congressionally designated spending, they wanted some assurances that 50% of the units would be for, and so back to phasing, 50% of the units in this phase, or, figuring out ways to navigate those waters, but still have this vision of really have this neighborhood reflect who we are. And the poor people aren't going to live in one building, and the old people in another building, and everybody else. It's like everybody lives here, and that's, that's the vision.
I just wanted to emphasize that our planning department has also had tremendous amount of work towards the need for workforce housing.
Yes.
Great. Other board members with questions? Bryce?
Yes, thank you, Daniel. So, Chloe, hi. This is, I don't know if it's the third or the fourth presentation I've been to, two of which were for people in our neighborhood, and I will reveal to the world that I live right down the hill from the Winston-Prouty Center. And I have to say that every time I hear you talk about this, you say all the right things. But I can't say that I see all the right things happening in between times. And, for example, until I got this, I was totally unaware that a traffic study had been done. And I can tell you that the people in my neighborhood are terribly upset by the traffic implications of this amount of housing. And I think the last time you had a community meeting on this was about a year and a half ago, I think. So, there's been a lot of kind of stewing under the surface amongst my neighbors about this. And then again, everything you say tonight sounds right. But I think on my way home, I'm actually going to start thinking, is she out of her mind? You
already think that.
Well, yeah, but then when I hear you talk, it kind of goes away. And anyway, I keep thinking phase one, sewer, water stuff, absolutely. But, you're going to need to demonstrate success with a small chunk of this housing and have it actually standing there as a standalone project with good sewer and water supply and all that. And show your investors, whoever they may be, that you can do this.
Right.
Because, the idea that you're going to put 300 units up there is just nuts until you show that you can put 30 units up there, let's say. That's the kind of scale that I'd like to see and that I think the neighborhood would tolerate. And I think, if you try to sell this big vision too hard, you're going to run into substantial opposition. That people, maybe not the community broadly defined, if you live over here someplace, okay, 300 units, great. But if you live in Esteville or thereabouts, it represents a threat. And it's felt that way anyway. And I'm not sure how to work around that other than to do it in little pieces, show that it works, and then go on from there. So, it's great to hear you say, of course it will be in phases, but I'd really like to hear more about what the initial phases look like, how you're going to get there, and then how can the community and the neighborhood support that? Because the way it's structured as this big deal is very hard to support.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate that feedback. We've talked about that before. We've talked about the phasing before. And I think the reason there's been such a delay between neighborhood meetings is because to go from this sort of big master plan, which is what we presented, to this next can we do it, and which is just from August to January, essentially. And then really grappling with, how do we, what's the next thing to present? And so, like I said, I think we're pretty close to, with UTL, being able to share, so here's the next iteration. And once you know the site design, it's a lot easier to talk about what the phasing might be. Up until now, it's been like, yes, of course it's going to be phasing, but and then maybe we'll do that building first, or what are the buildings even going to be? So I appreciate the feedback, and I think the delay has been more like how we're not ready to quite say, here's the thing. So I think we're a lot closer to that.
Thanks, Chloe. Thanks for answering the question. We're running a little behind time here, and there's a lot more to say about this project, but I know that there's a lot more to do as well, and so I'm sure you'll come back for future updates. Frick, would you like to ask a question? Yep.
Hi, Chloe. Frick at District 3 Squared. I love it that you brought up vehicle sharing, because I think that's one of the areas where we're totally missing the boat in terms of both how much we spend on vehicles and then, we're just talking about parking. There's a friend of mine who helped start an eco-village where they use 10% of the energy and 10% of the vehicles that the rest of us on average do. One of the things I haven't heard you say is about both the energy usage and the longevity of the buildings or the holding costs. It's been possible for well over a half century to build in this climate affordably in a way that does not require space heating. And it's one of the ongoing lost opportunities that shocks me every time I think about it. And the other thing is we are the home to the Rich Earth Institute, and you're having all these issues with concerns about plumbing. So I guess that's 3 questions.
Sure. Yeah. I think, again, sort of talking about building for the future. So all of that is on the table, and figuring out how to make the different pieces work. So I have actually talked with Kim Nace, who has the different part of Rich Earth, and thinking about back to phases or pilots, or who's going to invest in something that's sort of sexy and exciting, because there are different ways to fund this. There might be venture capital, or do we want venture capital coming in to pay for it? So I think my answer is yes. We're talking about all those different things, and then as we finalize this design, I think it will become more clear, like what we might go after, or what makes the most sense given where we end up with that design. But really wanting to build for longevity, sustainability, that's been from the beginning. If you're willing to do a deeper dive on these subjects, I would love to talk to you later. Yeah, I think I've said over and over, I'm happy to talk to anybody about anything at least once, and often, more often. So, okay, thank you.
Thanks, Frick. Thanks, Chloe. One final question. Yep, go ahead. Mr. DeGray.
By your numbers, a $78 million project?
For the housing?
For the housing. I don't think the revolving loan fund has anywhere near that amount of money.
I don't believe so. No. But it is a revolving loan fund. You never know.
As I was looking at the schematics, as Frick said, I used to live right across the street.
Yep.
And if I saw this, I'd be absolutely out of my mind. And I didn't see another entrance into the schematic, so you're just going to use that one main entrance for all of those people?
For now, and change the way that entrance happens, so that curve, the sort of discussion on, again, this is conceptual, just to keep remembering, and not even what you're looking at is sort of like old, but to change the intersection in some way so that it wouldn't be the curve. And certainly other people have brought up other entrances to the campus. That is not an easy, they're not obvious, easy ways to do that. But
you talked about a light, putting in a street light there? Yeah.
Or a 4-way stop or something that would be sort of traffic calming. Not what, some-way stop, 3-way stop.
What impact is this going to have on a school system?
Hopefully help it have more students since we're on the decline. But that is a great question. And I think it depends on what the demographic is. And certainly as we talk about the aging of Vermont, we're the second oldest state in the union. Sort of how are we going to address that? I would hope that. A lot of people actually say, let's put senior housing up there. I'm like, not how do we contribute to a sort of a healthy, vibrant community? So I think that's a great question.
Okay. Because, more students in the school system, we would hope a declining population in the school system would mean a reduction in my tax rate. more students coming in would have an impact on the taxpayers if we had a large influx of students?
Well, hopefully it would decrease the cost per student, right? Because, I mean, theoretically, the more students you have, the cost can be spread over more students. So theoretically, cost per pupil would go down if we had more. But that's just theoretical.
Hey, Dick, do you have several questions in a row that you'd like to ask?
No.
Yeah. We have. They're good questions. And Chloe, I'm appreciative of your answers.
Chloe at Winston-Prouty.org. I'm happy to talk to anybody, really, because it's it's our project, but it's our project.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is our project. Absolutely. Okay, so I'm going to move us on to the next agenda item. Thank you for coming, Chloe. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
The next item on our agenda is the Solid Waste Program public feedback. And Patrick, I believe, is going to talk us through it. Okay, John is going to talk us through this initially. And Patrick will no doubt.
Patrick is?
I
no.
can.
Oh,
no. So
I could read the thing if you like.
I mean, that's basically. We have, so the solid waste program, we've done some public engagement on this in a number of ways, which is summarized in your memo. We did a series of focus groups on this where we invited members of the public who were interested in the topic to come talk with us about some of the challenges around solid waste in Brattleboro. And we also did a survey that was well responded to with over 400 responses, which is an excellent number for a town of 12,000. And from that, we were able to take away several consistent themes that showed up both in the focus groups as well as from the survey around, particularly around things like people really like the recycling and compost programs that we have in town and would like to see that continue and are fearful that it could somehow be impacted if depending on what is worked out for the solid waste program. There was also a significant support and satisfaction with the current pay-as-you-throw approach, which, as we've discussed at a previous meeting, the current approach is not consistent with what the one vendor we have interested in providing service to the town is interested in providing to us. They would like to go to a mechanized system that would not involve the bags, but it would have carts that can be automatically dumped into their trucks. So there's a lot of information in here about feedback from the public. There's a big interest in large item collection. People seem to be interested in if we have to go to containers and having the smaller ones as opposed to larger ones. A bunch of other things I'm going to kind of gloss over a little bit, but I'm happy to, with Patrick's help, go into detail on any issue that struck the board and you want to explore further. We're here tonight to really get a sense from you. Have we, absent pricing, which we're still waiting for, have we gone enough down the path of community engagement to kind of have an understanding of what people are looking for to support decisions that you may make in July? I will say that we have had ongoing conversations with Casella, which was the one vendor that responded to our RFQ, and they have agreed to continue with the current service at the current pricing that we have on a month-to-month basis until we can get this worked out. They would like a commitment from us one way or another. If you're not interested in their services, they would like to know that relatively soon. If you are interested in their services, they would like to have us get into a contract relatively soon so that they can do the capital purchases they would need to do to provide what they think is optimum service for the town. What am I missing? Anything, Patrick?
Yeah, I don't think you're missing anything. I think just to sort of reiterate and maybe touch on a few things and add a little additional emphasis. What impressed me in particular, first of all, I think I just want to say it was John's idea that we do these focus groups, and I thought it was a fabulous idea. I didn't think of it at the time, but sitting in those meetings and having the opportunity to, over the course of an hour and a half, really dive into some complicated discussions with a group of interested local community members was really a rich conversation. The takeaway, to be sure, is both from the focus groups, from the surveys, from the people who have stopped by the town manager's office, from the people who've called the town manager's office, from the people who've emailed the town manager's office, the diversion efforts that we've been working on over the past couple of years, or many, many years, namely recycling and organics collection for composting, are very important to us, and they are a source of pride amongst folks in the community. That was really, really, really hit home again and again and again. Second to that, I would say there was significant interest in large item collection in some form. We think that's entirely possible given the discussions we've had with Casella, and we would imagine that there'll likely be some sort of large item collection in any pathway moving forward. Exactly how often are details to remain that we're still working on. After that, my personal feeling was that the data started to get, and the feedback started to get a little murky. A lot of folks believe in pay-as-you-throw, but believed it also required bags to do, which it really doesn't necessarily. It can be accomplished in any number of different ways. Using small carts, medium carts, large carts is one way. Using one cart, needing 2 carts or 3 carts is another way. None of those necessarily involve the use of bags. So particularly at the focus groups, once you could sort of talk through, okay, wait a minute, you can achieve pay-as-you-throw, but you could do it like this, or you could do it like that. Okay, I get it. So the method for how we achieve pay-as-you-throw obligations is dependent upon the type of contract model that we choose. That's been discussed in the backup. And at least in every one of the conversations that we had in the focus groups, there seemed to be general consensus that, all right, that's okay. It puts downward pressure on the size of the carts, right? People don't want gigantic carts at every location because it's easy. That would undermine the pay-as-you-throw objective. So that sort of puts downward pressure on the size of the carts, and that's something we're trying to take into consideration as we continue the negotiations with Casella. Let's see. After that, I would say the main takeaways are we want to continue with these diversion efforts. We feel that that's important. And I think as we move forward in the negotiations with Casella, trying to identify that standard contract versus the versus the franchise contract, how does that impact people, and what are the cost differences that might occur in each of those, along with, do we collect weekly or do we collect every other week, which I, again, kind of felt like we got mixed feedback about that. A lot of the people who were very strongly in favor of pay-as-you-throw felt every other week trash collection was fine. But then other people saw it as more of an equity issue, and that it's more difficult for particularly more downtown neighborhoods with apartments, and that lower income households might be more likely to live there, and as a consequence might better benefit from weekly collection. Also, particularly households with young children and diapers or something like that. A weekly collection would be preferred there for sure. And so there's a certain amount of weekly certainly simplifies things, right? You don't have to think, am I an A week? Is this a B week? Let's get the calendar out there. So there are, pros and cons to each. And I think at some point in time, when we're able to come back to you both with pricing and options, price is one thing to consider, and then frequency of collection, if the price difference isn't all that much, you might find yourself leaning towards going weekly as opposed to every other week.
Great. Thanks, Patrick. Thanks, John.
Yep.
So we received a bunch of feedback there. You've summarized it. Board, you have questions about this feedback or directions for the town manager's office? I personally think that you've done a good job with this project, and I'm happy to get all this feedback. Elizabeth.
Yes, thank you. The feedback was amazing, and I really appreciate all the people who participated and all the comments that we got. They were all thoughtful and helpful. And I also like the outcome, that people really like the diversions of the waste stream. And my only question is about the weekly or the bi-weekly. Will that make us lose our progress that we've made in reducing the waste stream? Like if it went to every week, would we have more waste?
I don't think transitioning to every week trash collection would necessarily have a significant detrimental impact on pay-as-you-throw. I think it continues then to put downward pressure on the size of the container, right?
It was interesting. We heard from a number of people who said, I don't even need it every other week. Yeah, I could do trash pickup once a month. We heard that from several people. I mean, it was surprising.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But maybe not this week because it's so hot.
I don't know. Yeah. I mean, there's lots of factors there, and rightly or wrongly, I mean, you all need to have us design a program that meets the needs of everyone in town, or don't do it at all, too. I mean, that's another option, of course.
Yeah.
So.
Great. Well, I look forward to aligning these precepts with the costs.
Great. Thanks, Liz. Peter?
I think I just, more of a statement and maybe some clarification. As I understand it, this is nothing that the town or this board is putting forward. It is just sort of incumbent on us to comply with the way our awarded hauler would like to see it moving forward. And am I correct in?
Well,
I mean, maybe that's worded a little harshly, but
just I would say that we haven't awarded anything yet.
Okay,
we only had one response to a request for qualifications,
and there are ways to go it on our own without going through Casella if we choose to do that. Clearly they have a big role in our decision making, but I don't think they can dictate the outcome.
No, and I wasn't.
And I think we can, in fact, reject their offers if we decide that's best.
Right, and I don't. And that was a door I wasn't looking to open up. But so I think I'm just saying. So if we design something that meets the needs of the people of Brattleboro and trash pickup and all of that, is it feasible that Casella would say, no, we need to do the container pickup?
We need to do
meaning, so like we just say, hey, we just want to keep it the way it is.
Yeah, they've already told us they're not offering that service the way it is right now.
To my point, like, so how deep of a concern, without going off the reservation, as it were, how deep into these conversations, how much, and you're right, there's a tremendous amount of feedback on how people would want it, but how much of this actually falls within our control in the current construct of compost, recycling, and trash pickup?
Patrick.
So I want to draw a distinction between mechanized collection, which is something that Casella is interested in having this contract oriented around, right? and the requirements of pay-as-you-throw, which have nothing to do with Casella. And those are state mandated requirements that state that the collection and disposal of trash need to be based upon the weight or volume of the trash. So that can be achieved in many, many different ways. And different collection systems may lend themselves to different pay-as-you-throw practices. But that's not necessarily something that, it's not Casella who's asking us, well, this is how you need to do pay-as-you-throw. They're open to discussing all manner of different ways of achieving the objectives of pay-as-you-throw. What they're seeking for us to do is transition to mechanized collection, and that's going to be complicated and a little expensive. But there are reasons why that's not necessarily a bad thing as well. Certainly would help to sort of clean up town. As you drive around Brattleboro on a particular day, you know what trash day it is. If you're driving in on Western Avenue, it's Wednesday. And, do we necessarily want to continue with big mountain of trash at the end of the driveway just sitting on the side of the road? Or would it be a little nicer to have a community where, 3 carts are kind of lined up, or maybe just 2 if that's that household's need for that particular week? So it's a transition and it's a change. Not all of it is a consequence of the vendor. So
okay, that's fair. Because as I understood it, pay as you throw is something we moved to lighten our loads going to the landfill and transfer stations, and as these places to dispose of this trash get further and further away from where we are, the costs go up, and I just happen to know a lot about this because I fought the whole pay-as-you-throw thing and then got a real lesson as to how our garbage gets moved around the planet, and it's quite costly. So I understood the pay-as-you-throw thing after a while and adopted it. So, but my question was, so we do have a conversation here that can be had.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, I would point out that Casella has said quite clearly that they're not going to keep the same system as it is now. They are going to mechanized collection, which means specific types of carts. And if we want to go with Casella, we're going to have to make that change. So, yeah, it'd be great if we had some negotiating room to say, well, we would like things the way they are now. Can we continue with that longer? And from discussions I've heard, the answer was clearly no. That option is not open. I would like, however, to hand out these things, which are my unsuccessful attempt to structure my own thinking around this. As you'll see, it's a matrix, and my attempt was just to get all the different variables, or at least some of the different variables, into a format where I could look at them simultaneously and see how they add up with each other.
Can I just pause you for a second? So
yeah.
I understand the intention of this, and you're putting your thinking on a piece of paper.
I don't want everybody to look at this right now. I just want to. My point is that there's a lot of variables here, and that we need to have the input for us in ways that we can think about them in a complicated fashion. Mm-hmm. So I would advocate for some presentation of the material in a way that we can make those comparisons. And it's not unlike what we were looking at before with all our options on the parking system. We're going to need some way to sit down and look at what our options really are. And, this, if you want to spend some time with this is my initial attempt to do that. I don't think it's particularly successful or complete, but at least it isolates some of the individual variables that we need to assemble in a pattern that works for the town.
Right. So I want to thank you for doing this work, and I also want to point out that it's difficult to process this information that you've just provided here. It's also difficult for the public to access because it wasn't provided to us, for the backup material. So folks who are in the room did just get handed a sheet of paper with, some of Franz's work on it. Folks who are on Zoom don't have that information. So I don't want to dive into this right now. Maybe
That's
this
fine.
is for a future
That's fine.
conversation.
Yeah.
It is getting late in the evening. I'm getting a little tired. We've got a bit more business to attend to. Are there other things that the board needs to say about this feedback that we've received from the public and other questions from the public? Okay, seeing none, seeing 2 questions in the public, let's go to them, and then we'll come back real quick, and then we'll move on. So, Tom and then Frick.
I did skim the background materials, but I didn't quite understand. With the pay-as-you-throw still applying to the size of bins, if we go the mechanized route, does that also factor in how often they're picked up?
Hey, Tom, can I ask you to do me a favor?
Yeah.
And I should have said this.
Oh, introduce
And it's
myself?
like, just come this way. And
Okay. Oh, sorry.
I
Yeah.
will help
Speak
direct
to the
traffic.
board. Right,
Yes.
okay.
And other presenters as well.
Right, okay, thank you. Right, so with the current pay-as-you-throw, it's a bag, and I realize we don't have that option. If we go with Casella, we'll go to a bin. But my question is more, with the bag, it was, you literally paid, it was a direct correlation with how often and how much you threw away. If I was to think, okay, I don't generate much trash, so I'll order the smallest bin, but then I don't use it often, and would I pay less than someone who uses it often?
Great question. Yeah. Patrick?
Yeah, so the answer to that is yes. Exactly how depends upon which model of contract we put together with Casella. There is a standard contract where, the town and Casella have a one-to-one relationship, and the fees for the collection and disposal of all 3 waste streams are paid to Casella by the town. So what that would lead to likely is a system where the carts are smaller, right? Where the carts are either collected less frequently, or potentially if I have a larger household that's going to generate more garbage than can fit reasonably in this cart, we may need to have additional carts, and those additional carts would cost additional money. If we were to choose a franchise contract, it may be the case where the town pays for the diversion efforts so as to keep the bar for that as low as humanly possible. However, the paying for the collection and disposal of trash would be a one-to-many relationship between Casella and the community, so that you and your household might choose to pay for a small cart, and somebody next door with 8 people in the household might need a much larger cart and have to pay a higher price for that larger cart. So there are different ways to sort of kind of get at the same outcome.
Okay. Thank you, Patrick.
Yes, sir.
Satisfied? Follow-up question?
Yeah, but I think, so if the house across from me gets 1 small bin, and I also have 1 small bin, and pickup is weekly, and they put it out every week, but I put it out once a month, would we end up paying the same amount or a different amount in any scenario?
I think John
Daniel
said he has an answer. Hi, Tom.
I totally get the idea that you're talking about, Tom, and that may be difficult to arrange with the
That's
vendor.
what it seems like.
Because they want to have set schedules and have it be easy. So that may be difficult.
Yeah.
Yep.
Another thing is I don't know how much control we actually have over the Wyndham Solid Waste Management District and what they accept for compost.
I don't know either. Patrick?
Yeah.
So there are 2 different parties that have a role in deciding what goes into that compost. And it depends upon how you get the material to the district, right? If you're hauling it yourself, then you need only be concerned with the rules and regulations that are put forward by the district compost manager, right? They very carefully keep track of how hot the compost piles get in order to be able to ensure that certain pathogens are killed off. So, they've got a certain set of rules that help to inform what can go into their compost, knowing their methods and the temperatures they achieve and the durations they achieve those temperatures, et cetera. If this is being picked up curbside, then there are also other considerations that may be coming from the hauler. So things like weight become slightly more complicated.
Okay. And I ask that because maybe it's a state law issue, but I feel like since we already accept dog feces, and cat feces, maybe since diapers with human diapers have been such a frequently raised issue about, there are compostable diapers and human waste is compostable. So maybe that could be a kind of outlet, pun intended, for addressing a fair amount of people's concerns.
I can tell you the district is not interested in composting human waste. Not at this time.
Right.
Good to know. Frick, you had a question, and then I think we're going to need to move on. Pierre, maybe real quick.
Frick's probably District 9. I love your suggestion, but we need to get to that. Why can't we do a combination of the bins and the bags? I mean, one of the things I don't understand is how the billing will work for the bins. However, if we just supply the bins like we did with the recycling totes and people still buy the bags, I think we can achieve some level of simplicity and the ability for people who have been able to reduce their output to reduce their costs as well. But if we don't do that, how is the billing going to happen for the bins?
Good question. Mr. Morland.
When you say how is the billing going to work with the bins, do you mean
who will pay for them?
The collection of them,
well, no,
who will provide them?
I'm just picturing, the bins as a alternative to the bags, and so there would, I was imagining, be some periodic fee, annual or whatever, related to the bin. But you just buy the bin once, or pay for the bin once, or how does that work?
So there are options that we're working on. My understanding is that these bins last quite a long time. I know the ones that we've got here, we've been using for close on 20 years. So it really shouldn't be something that gets replaced frequently, if that's your concern.
No, but I mean, how does the delivery of the bin to a household translate into a tipping fee? Where the bags are obvious. You buy the bag, you fill the bag, you dispose of the bag, and there's a one-to-one correlation between how much you dispose of and how much you pay for.
John?
The way to think about it, Frick, is the bins are like a reusable bag. So you're just using it over and over and over again. The vendor would bill you in the household for that on, like, say, a monthly basis for the pickup of that. That's how the franchise model would work. The standard model that Patrick was talking about, it would be paid for through property taxes, basically. So those are kind of the two different models he was referring to. I don't know if that's helpful, but
okay. And maybe not apropos for this conversation, but I didn't see the town owns a truck and does it ourselves option, and maybe that's what this blank space is at the bottom. But
maybe you guys can have
could
a discussion.
be filled by many other
during
options.
office hours, right?
Yeah, or any time.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Pierre, real quick.
I just didn't know if we're overcomplicating this whole thing.
Well, possibly.
From what I've learned from other towns that have gone through this whole process, I don't know if we've done any surveys what other towns are doing. I know Hinsdale's dropped Casella, Vernon's dropped Casella. It's just too expensive. Now the franchise and standard, that was the first I heard that if you went the franchise standards, each individual household's going to get a monthly bill, and we wouldn't pay anything in town taxes towards trash removal?
that's one possibility. Yep.
And if the standard would be trash removal would be in our town taxes, and that would include the rental of the bin, because I heard the bin rental's like $30 some odd a month.
It's not exactly a rental. It's the bins would need to be purchased, acquired, distributed, and then there's a monthly service fee to collect. It's a collection fee. It's not really a rental.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I just have a hard time believing Casella is going to be willing to option different sized bins. I think they're going to want one standard bin, period, whether you put just a little bit of trash in it or have it stuffed full, whether it's trash, compost, or whatever, recycling, it's not going to matter. If you want to do it yourself and have 3 bins and pay for 3 bins, go for it. I think it's all going to come down to cost, and I think we're trying to overcomplicate this whole thing because I think Casella is basically going to dictate how the program's going to run.
Hey, Pierre, let me ask you a question. What would you like to see?
What would I like to see?
Yeah.
It's a real good question. I mean, if it's going to go through our town taxes, I want to have the option to opt out and not pay that tax, and I'll take care of my own. I live in a little neighborhood with 2 other houses, and we could probably bring in someone like Franklin & Son or something like that, good enough, and get our own little container for all 3 of us as a house, as like a little group, and pay very little. I mean, one of those is like $70 a month, and you divide that by 3 households. It's pretty reasonable.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for answering that. So I would like to move us along. This is work that is ongoing, right? So the town manager's office is in conversations with Casella. We're coming back to us with some pricing pretty soon.
We hope to at your July 23rd meeting, Daniel.
Okay. And so, yeah, it's complicated, and hopefully we can get some good options and some options that are palatable. It's complicated.
I just wanted to thank Christine because she wasn't here when we were thanking everybody who participated, and their work was so helpful.
Oh, thanks, Christine. All right, you were in the focus groups. We are so far behind schedule, and I'm actually going to move us on unless it's a burning question.
It's a 2-second question.
Very quickly.
Oscar Heller, Brattleboro. I just couldn't find it in the backup materials just now. When is the contract end date for what we currently have?
July 1st, right?
Well, that's complicated as well.
Yeah.
So, currently we're on a month-to-month basis with them, including into July.
So could that continue into July if we didn't finish our negotiations?
Yeah, that was mentioned earlier. Yeah. Sorry, you missed that. Okay. So we have an agreement with them to go month to month until we arrive at a contract. So we're actively doing that.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. So, board, I'm going to request that we take the preliminary 25 legislative agenda priorities and, well, actually for the public, you should know that this was something that was going to be considered at our retreat last Thursday. We didn't have time for it. It's something that needs, I would say, 25, 30 minutes of discussion that I don't feel like we have time for or energy for right now. And I would like to table that for our next meeting. And I'm looking for your consent to do so. And I would really request your consent to do so, actually.
I'm good with it.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Is that a motion to table the matter?
Sure.
Well, I'll vote in favor of it.
Great. We will table it. And I would say that you have the memo. You can give feedback to John. These priorities came out of town staff. So give feedback to John in advance. That will help us the next time we come to it because we do have the legislative delegation coming to us in our first July meeting. But these were preliminary priorities, so it's just a flavor of what we might be interested in. So we're going to table that. We're going to move on to item F of new business, which is committee appointments. And boy, do we have a lot of committee members to appoint. Good Lord. Okay, let me get my brain in order. It is late. It's been a long day. We have a number of committees with applicants. Some of these are uncontested. And I'm going to say that we could create a slate of uncontested committee applicants. And I could read that to you now, and we could vote on that. Then we can vote on the contested ones. Maybe we want to hear from Brattleboro Housing Partnerships before we do that, and then we can probably be done. So here is the slate of committee appointments that I am proposing for the uncontested, yes. For the ADA Advisory Committee, Mark Formel. For the Arts Committee, Kirsten Martzi. I know that that's a spell mistake because I know her. We are going to come to Brattleboro Housing later. CPCC we're not doing tonight. We have interviews scheduled next meeting. Design Review Committee alternate, Maya Hasegawa. We're not going to do DRB or DRB alternates, I guess.
Design Review Committee is not an alternate. I think it is a straight.
Okay, well, that's what it says here. So we'll ask Jessica to check that out.
Where does it say alternate?
Here.
Doesn't on mine.
Oh, boy. Well, we could be in trouble. You check as I'm going along then, please, John.
Okay.
Just the kind of wrinkle we love. Energy Committee, appointing Dave Lewis, Josh Traeger, Tony Duncan. Fence Viewer, 3 of them. Mark Formel, Brian Robinson. Oh, actually, Brian Robinson withdrew from everything other than Rec and Park, so I'm going to assume that included Fence Viewer. So Fence Viewer, Mark Formel, Judy Sopensky. Inspector of Lumber, Shingles, and Wood, Mark Formel. Planning Commission we're going to vote on shortly. Actually, no. Planning Commission is now no longer no longer contested. So we've got Tom Mosikowski. Congratulations, Tom. Gary Stroud, Lindsay Britt, and Bonnie Gervin. Rec and Parks Board we're going to come to in a minute. Senior Solutions Advisory Council, Jane Wheeler. Traffic Safety Committee, Chamber of Commerce Representative Arthur Davis. Tree Advisory Committee we're going to do at our next meeting. That is the slate. Board members, all those in favor of approving that slate? Do you want to discuss it?
Well, yeah,
okay.
Absolutely.
Any discussion on the slate?
Yeah, I don't think just the fact that somebody's uncontested means that we should automatically appoint them.
I don't think so either, but I've proposed this slate, and you can tell me which one of these you oppose.
Okay. The Energy Committee, Dave Lewis. I don't know Dave Lewis, and he actually provided 0 information in his form that's in here. There's no information about him that we have in front of us. As far as I know, he's terrific, but the question is, do we go ahead and appoint somebody to a committee where we have no information about?
It's a great question. Board, what do you think? There are no opinions. I'm assuming that we think it's fine. I don't know how to handle that.
I know it's a difficult thing because it's late at night and we don't have much energy and it's a long-term question.
It's not that difficult. People step forward to volunteer.
Yeah.
I assume nothing but the best intentions in that motion to volunteer.
Yeah.
So I would.
I see your hand. We're going to kick it around here.
I would propose.
Yeah.
That we move this as a slate and accept it.
Okay, that's clear.
That's very clear. And I think there are some individuals who can be disruptive on committees and that have disrupted committees in the past. And that it can, having been on committees with disruptive people, it can make the work of the committee difficult. And I'm not saying these people have bad intentions, but there's, sometimes there may be a bar that people need to jump over.
Okay, so let me just check in real quick. So are you saying that you oppose Mr. Lewis being appointed to the Energy Committee because you have knowledge that Mr. Lewis is a disruptive member?
No, okay. Absolutely not. I don't know anything about the guy.
All right.
I'll go along with appointing people. But I think it's important to say that I think there's a flaw in this process as we're doing it.
Yeah, okay. I heard on that. there were a lot of committee members here to be appointed. I confess that I don't think I got to the Energy Committee appointments. I was too focused on all the other business
Yeah,
that was
for
in
sure.
front of us, including all of the ones that are contested. So I am comfortable with taking the chance. I do believe that, we tend to appoint with best intentions. So right now we have a motion to approve a slate. Is there any further discussion of that motion? Okay. All those in, Mr. Sprite, would you like to talk about approving this slate of people? There's a microphone that you need to come to if you do. No. Good. Okay. All right. So all those in favor of approving the slate, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye. 5-0. Point heard. Not a bad one. Maybe another day.
Yeah.
Okay, so we appointed a bunch of people. Yay. Next thing I want to do is move on to Brattleboro Housing Partnerships. Christine Hazard is here, and there has been an email in our backup material from Elisha Underwood, who is the Brattleboro Housing Partnerships Board Chair, and that email makes 2 recommendations for who you would like to appoint. Would you like to speak to it?
Sure. Alicia would have liked to be here this evening. She couldn't be here, so I'm representing the board and on their behalf. We we met with 4 of the applicants, and they were all wonderful. So we were really lucky. We had a great group of people who applied. There were 2 others that applied, one of which we weren't able, I think he might have withdrawn his name, or we weren't able to contact him, but then there was also another person from Chesterfield, and unfortunately she wasn't eligible to be on our board.
Okay.
So right now we have representation from a resident at the Sam Elliott Apartments. Our board chair grew up at Ledgewood Heights. And she has a family member that lives at one of our properties. We have a Section 8 participant, and we have another member who is a representative of the Brattleboro Memorial Hospital, and she has been part of our redevelopment team for the Melrose Terrace project. That is Michelle Wright. So we would like to see Michelle continue on the board. She has been a wonderful member since she joined after Byron Stuckey resigned from his position. And when we interviewed or met with the 4 people and asked them lots of questions and told them about the board responsibilities, we really came to the decision that both Susie Wagner and Susie Walker were both wonderful in the sense that they both had a lot of board experience, and they could maybe bring that to the group for others who might not have as much board experience. And after further review, Alicia determined that on behalf of the board, they really thought that Susie Walker would be the best candidate. She has a lot of board experience. She helped Turning Point to really develop into a bigger organization, also build a center, and she just really seemed to fit with what we need right now for the board. That being said, if we had another opening anytime soon, we would really invite all of those people to come back. They were just all excellent and very engaged. And so that is the recommendation.
Great.
If you have any questions, let me know.
Thanks so
sorry
much.
to keep you late.
No, I appreciate you being here, and I'm sorry that we ran a little bit late. It is what it is.
It was nice to get out of my hot house. So
yeah.
nice.
Okay. Is it still hot outside? Okay. So, but I just want to kind of flag that, these recommendations, we are not required to take them. We could, if you want to, just go through our usual process where people nominate folks to this committee and then we vote on them. So I want to raise that is a possibility. If you'd like to do that, I'm happy doing it. If you would rather just accept these 2 recommendations that have been well vetted by Brattleboro Housing, then we could also do that. So looking for guidance. Elizabeth?
As long as it's legal within our charter to take the recommendations of the Brattleboro Housing Partnership, I'm happy to do so and nominate Susan Walker and Michelle Wright.
Okay.
I'll go along with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Seeing some nods. Any objections? Okay.
No troubles for me.
Elizabeth has made nominations to the Brattleboro Housing Partnerships Board for Susan Walker and Michelle Wright. Any further discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Okay, 5-0. So we've appointed Susan Walker and Michelle Wright to the Brattleboro Housing Partnerships Board. Last item today is the Recreation and Parks Board. And I'm going to do this in the way that our rules say that we do it. So here's what our rules say. Blah, 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 Okay, sorry, I'm reading. So we did interviews. Upon conclusion of the interviews, the Select Board shall consider all candidates who've submitted letters of interest by open nomination. Each Select Board member may nominate more than one candidate, but only after each member has had the opportunity to make a nomination. So we're going to nominate people. Then the chair shall put the question on each candidate to the Select Board in the order that the candidates were nominated, one question at a time. The Select Board shall vote in public, with their individual votes announced by voice and recorded by the Secretary in the minutes. The chair of the Select Board continues this procedure until the required number of board or committee members is selected. If there's a tie, we repeat it until it's resolved. So, opening nominations for the Recreation and Parks Board. Franz Reichsman.
I would like to nominate Ricky Davidson.
Okay, Ricky was nominated first. Other nominations. Elizabeth.
I would like to nominate Denise Patinga Donahoe.
Okay, Denise was nominated second. Other nominations. Peter or Richard, help me out here. Okay, I'm going to nominate Brian Robinson. All right, so now we're going to vote on those people in the order that they were nominated. You may vote every single time if you wish to.
I'd be curious if anyone has statements of support for the people that they nominated.
Thank you for your curiosity. Does anybody have any statements of support for people
I don't
that they
know
nominated?
anything about Denise, and I don't know why I should vote for her.
She has an application in here, and as I said at the beginning of the meeting, she wasn't able to make the interviews, so I'm asking you to take it on the basis of a written application.
Okay, I just thought maybe somebody knew something more.
I don't believe so.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, I just think it's the point that she called, she demonstrated her continued interest in an application by telling that she was unable for medical reasons to attend the interview.
And had we been able to reschedule without impacting that committee, we probably would have, but we couldn't. First of all, we're going to consider Ricky Davidson. All those in favor of appointing Ricky Davidson to the Rec and Parks Board, please raise your hand and say aye, and then hold them there so I can count. All right, that's 5-0, so I'm going to write 5 next to Ricky. Next up is Denise Patinga Donahoe. All those in favor of appointing Denise to the Rec and Parks Board, please raise your hand and say aye. That's 1. And then thirdly, Brian Robinson. All those in favor of appointing Brian Robinson to the Rec and Parks Board, please raise your hand and say aye. That's 3. Okay. So we have appointed Ricky Davidson and Brian Robinson to the Recreation and Parks Board for a 3-year term. Congratulations to them. And I think that concludes our appointments. Don't worry, John. The next item on our agenda is item G, which was discussion of the Vermont Childcare Tax Credit Payment Allocation. And so this is going to need a little table setting from either John or Patrick.
Yep, I think I can try to do this. The town got a notice from the Department of Taxes in late February about the child care contribution tax, that it has an effective date of July 1st, 2024, that the tax is on gross payroll and is set at 0.44%, that it affects every employee, full-time, part-time, seasonal, that employers have 2 options. One option is for employers to pay 100% of the tax at 0.44%, or the other option is that employers pay 75% or 0.33%, and employees pay 25% or 0.11% on the payroll. Staff did an estimate of the cost to the town of each of these options based on an estimated gross payroll for calendar year 2023 of $8.874 million. The cost of option 1, the town pays the full amount, would be $39,045 annually. For option 2, the town would pay $29,284 annually, and the employees would pay $9,761 annually. Many towns are bringing this issue to contract negotiations if they are choosing option 2. Our labor contracts currently go through June 2026. We are proposing, the administration is proposing to have the town pay for the full amount until we are negotiating contracts again. We could bring it up with the unions at that time. We could always change it if through contract negotiations we want to change it. But for this small amount to open up for union contracts, it would probably cost us more to do that than to pay this. So that was our rationale in putting this on the consent.
Thanks, John. Franz, I'll give you first go at this as soon as you wanted to pull it.
Well, thank you. So I had two concerns. One was, how the act was passed, I guess, last year, so it seemed to me maybe it could have gone through the regular budget process. But what John just said about the tax department not getting the information out until February precludes our having put it into our budget process. So that makes perfect sense. And the rationale given for having the town pay the entire amount also makes sense. So my questions are answered. Thank you.
Thanks, Franz. Other board members with questions? I just want to concur with John that I really think it's prudent to not reopen those contract negotiations, when we still have 2 years of them to go. Great. And it's a small amount of money within our 20-something $1 million budget. And we have a motion required. It is on page 11. Franz, I'm going to request that you read it.
Okay. This is assuming I can find page 11, which with just a little luck should be able to do.
Here it is.
Thank you. So, I move that the board directs the town manager to comply with Act 76 of 2023, the Vermont Childcare Contribution Act, by paying 0.44% of gross payroll to the State Department of Taxes for wages earned on or after July 1st, 2024.
Okay, great. Franz has made a motion to direct the town manager to comply with Act 76 of 2023, the Vermont Childcare Contribution Act, by paying 0.44% of gross payroll to the State Department of Taxes for wages earned on or after July 1, 2024. Any further discussion on that motion? Discussion from members of the public? Seeing none. All those in favour, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passes 5-0. Looking for one final motion. Elizabeth.
I move to adjourn.
Elizabeth made a motion to adjourn. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Passes 5-0. Thank you to BCTV. Thank you to the town of Brattleboro employees. Thank you to all the people that joined us. Thanks to our presenters. And I hope that you all have a happy Juneteenth.
And the robots.
And the robots are new overlords.